Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome, friends, to the Gone to the Dogs podcast. Steve Fielder back at you here after a couple of weeks of playing out in the mud puddles of the Arkansas Delta. Just returned from Holly Grove, Arkansas, where we stayed this year, actually a little town called Lawrenceville, just south of Holly Grove, and ran into several fellas while I was out there. I guess I was away from home about 9 days. We hunted 6 nights while I was out this year, with my usual group of suspects that were in camp this year. We had the same group, Nubbin Moore, of course, my sidekick and traveling buddy, were there, and Randy Smith of Mississippi and Morris Hardy, also of Mississippi, were there. And they brought a first-time guest, and man, what a find. This guy can cook. I'm telling you, he's a cook. So we welcomed Bobby Bly into camp this year for the first year. And then, of course, from Alabama, Jamie and Trey Perrin were there as well. We hunted some with the local hunter there, John Storts, and also got to hunt with Matt Collins. Matt kind of bailed us out this year by providing an extra cabin. We had more guys than we had beds in this new place that we stayed. So, and Matt took us hunting on the boat our last night, which was Saturday night. We left out on the Monday. Actually, I left Florida on Sunday, drove to Alabama, and then Nubbin. And, I forgot Keith Durkee from Alabama. How can I forget Keith? Nubbin, Keith, and I traveled together out to the White River, and we began our adventure this year on Monday night. Now, while I was out there, one of the first things I usually do is run over to the town of DeWitt, Arkansas, and that always includes a stopover at a local sporting goods store called Webb's. And as I walked into Webb's this year, a fella walked up to me that I was not familiar to me and asked if I was Steve Fielder, and I said yes, I was. And that was a great first-time meeting with our guest. It's coming up to the microphone right now from the great state of Tennessee, around Jackson, I believe, Brandon Taylor. Brandon, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing wonderful. Glad to be here.
Well, it was really neat to meet you for the first time. You introduced your friend to me 2 or 3 times, and being older than dirt as I am, I've had trouble remembering his name. Who was the fellow that was with you, Brandon?
That is Lindsey Kirk. That is my uncle.
Your uncle, I see. And
yes, sir.
Talking to him briefly there, I don't believe he's a coon hunter
No,
in
sir,
the truest sense of the word, is he?
No, sir. He is just an all-around outdoorsman. He has hunted everything from ducks to elk to hogs to coons, you name it. He's probably went on an adventure after it.
Very nice fellow. Now, you guys right away, of course, learned that you were from the state of Tennessee, which is very near and dear to my heart because my family on my dad's side originated there in what we call Middle Tennessee, around Dixon, Dixon County. But you guys, well, before we get into that, give me a little bit of backstory, Brandon. Tell me about yourself, what you do, your family, and then, your coon hunting journey so far.
Yes, sir. So, like I say, Brandon Taylor's my name. I live in a little area, community called Montezuma. It's south of Jackson. I'm 30. I've got a beautiful wife named Sarah, and 2 little boys. Their name is Sawyer and Everett. They're 5 and 7. I actually work at a factory in Jackson. I work for the Pringles. So every time y'all get to open up a fresh can of Pringles potato chips, y'all can thank me.
All right. I love them. I love them.
Glad to hear.
You can't just eat one, that's for sure.
No, sir. No, you gotta get to the bottom of it. That's for sure.
Right. That's awesome.
So coon hunting come to me later in life. I've always been in the outdoors. My granddaddy, he would take me deer hunting, and around here we would go to the Tennessee River in the springtime. And if you say the proper name, it's white bass, but if you're born and raised around here, you just call them stripes.
Right.
We would do that during the springtime. But when I was about 20, I was working actually at a hospital at the time, and me and this gentleman I worked with just got talking outdoors and things like that, and coon hunting just come about in the conversation. And of course, I'd always liked hounds when I was a kid. This will play back into it. My mom and dad surprised me with a basset hound puppy, and his name was Muggsy Bogues, just like the basketball player, because he was short and stumpy. So I always thought a hound looked neat, but as far as being exposed to coon hunting, I had never been exposed to it until we read the book Where the Red Fern Grows when I was in school.
Yeah.
And fast forward to this gentleman met. His name was Cody McMahon. He said, well, I have a coon dog, and if you got a place to go, I'd be more than glad to let you come along with me. I said, well, how about tonight? So just up the road from my house here is Chickasaw State Park, and we went, and like I said, I had never experienced anything like this. So we turned them dogs loose, and this was in early December, kind of like right now. And that particular year, it was bitter cold. It was probably in the 20s, and it wasn't 5 minutes. And he had an English and a Walker, 2 gyps, and turned them loose, and it was no time. That Walker female, she opened up. And right in that second, I said, this is what I got to do. I just love hearing that. Well, we walked down in this holler because home here, it is nothing like the White River. We do have some flat bottoms, but a lot of it is hills and hollers. And it was a journey, to say the least. And we get over there, and it's a tree a little bit bigger around than a telephone pole, and about 12 feet up was the best looking possum you'd ever seen. And of course, me not knowing better, I was tickled to death. I was over there getting ready to love on the dogs, and the gentleman I was with, he jumped all over them poor dogs, scalded them, and he said, go on. I said, they weren't supposed to do that. He said, no, we're wanting to tree coons, not possums. But we ended up treeing about 3 possums that night, and I loved every minute of it. And I've just been hooked ever since. The gentleman that I really started hunting steady with after that actually lives not far from me. I kept passing her house, and after I'd been on that little hunting trip, I was like, I have got to get a dog of my own. And I started out with a black and tan. I got it for the whopping price of $100. Thought, wow, this is going to be the best thing ever. And
Where have I
so,
heard this story before?
absolutely. And he did have $1 million mouth. I will say that. Now everything else was so, but Willie Newsom is the gentleman I pulled in his driveway. I seen some kennels behind his house, and I said, I've got to see if this man coon hunts. And my dad was actually the one that gave me his name, because I was trying to find somebody else to hunt with that I could be steady with, because the boy that introduced me to it, I changed jobs and I wasn't able to be in contact with him as much. But anyhow, I knock on his door and his wife comes, and I said, "Hello, my name's Brandon Taylor. Is Willie Newsom around?" And she, Miss Francis, his wife, she said, "Willie, there's someone here to talk to you." And he come to the door and he said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm doing all right." And I said, "My name's Brandon. I was wondering if you could hunt." And he said, "Oh, yes, absolutely." He said, "Let me get my shoes on." So we sat outside, and I bet we talked for 2 hours. And at the end of it, he said, "Well, when you want to go?" And I mean, I just showed up at the man's house. So it was from that point, I hunted with him and Larry Kent and a man by the name of Fred Young regular. Of course, I ended up selling a black and tan I had, and he honestly turned out to be an all right dog. I had to sell him due to financial reasons at the time. But when I finally got back into having a dog, they got me into the blue ticks, and they've started me out with some pretty nice dogs. So they've kind of spoiled me to it. So I've been trying to stick with them. And of course, I've, like everybody else, I've went through probably 10 to the one that I've ended up keeping.
Well, it's a process for sure.
It is. And, I hear a lot of people talk about how they started out. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of resources. So when I started out, I was just like back in the good old days. All I needed was a carbide light, because all I had was a Walmart spotlight and a compass. And I had a piece of rope that I tied around a Model 60 22, and that was it. It was either get lost or remember your way back. So, if dogs crossed the road, you just had to try to cut them off. So when I finally did upgrade, I thought, man, I done stepped off in heaven now. So, but I've enjoyed it. I just don't think there's a more involved type of pursuit of game, be it coon or big game, just working with the dog in general and seeing them work, how my personal opinion, how God designed them to be.
That's right.
It's incredible. And I'm just so thankful for the men that have mentored me along my way. I still got a lot of learning to do. I feel like I learn something every time I go out there, for sure. And I just think it's just something about it. I don't know. It's you either love it. It's either something you're going to try to stay with, or I've carried several people, and it's usually one way or the other. They either want to come every time, or they're like, "I'm never doing it."
That's it. That's it. Well, with your desire, and your determination and attitude toward the sport, Brandon, I think you're going to be able to enjoy it for many years to come. It's something that served me very, very well in many areas of my life. I was one of the few that was able to make a living involved with these coon dogs. But that aside, just the friendships, just we talked about that in our camp this year, how these guys are our friends and brothers, we get real close. and we were all kind of rooting for Trey Pear, and they had a pro sport shootout there, White River shootout last weekend, and Trey had been hunting with us all week. I told him it's because he's hunting with us, all these good dogs we got rubbed off on him. But the truth of that matter is he's got a real nice hound. He calls him Wall Street, and he played second in that White River shootout this last weekend, and I think that gave him a check somewhere in the north of $8,000. So he had a pretty good little weekend. But
absolutely,
yeah. But Brandon, I wanted to touch on something there when the idea of this podcast is to talk to some fellows about their experience at the White River this year. Some of them are newcomers. Some are guys that have gone for many years. And, each year is a different experience. For me, I've been going 15 years now. But when I met you and we started talking, you told me about an interesting situation that you boys had gotten yourself into. You wanted to share that a little bit about your experience this year at White River?
Absolutely. So, in typical fashion, on going any type of distance, going on a trip, something's going to go awry. And once we arrived where we was camping at, we was going to go ahead and unload the side by side, and come to find out, we didn't have the key to start it. And so it was definitely causing a bit of a challenge there. And like a lot of things now, there's so much that is computerized, even in side by side anymore. It's not like the good old days. Take you a jump wire and start it off, and then put the choke on to kill it. So anyway, we had some nice folks there at the camp try to help us do some troubleshooting. Of course, I told my uncle, I said, they're going to swear we stole this thing, and we're trying to figure out how to get it cranked up. So we're representing West Tennessee well, I can tell you. But and one guy, I got to put him on here. He really did hang with us a while and try to help us, and that was Mr. Joe Lewis. He was camped out right across from us. Lord, he pulled out a whole toolbox of stuff trying to help us get it.
Joe Lewis is a great guy. Many of the hunters.
Real nice. Yeah, he even talked to us a little bit about some of the trails because we was trying to decide what we was going to do if we couldn't get it going. And I said, we drove all the way down here, and it's thousands of acres, and we're going to be stuck with just walking, which we shouldn't. I got to thinking about that. I was like, as flat as it was, I shouldn't have complained anyway, because if you get tired walking there, it's because you walked a long way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And then we decided we was going to go to the next town and try to talk to some folks, see if there was some type of way we could get a key or something like that. And so that's when we went to Webb's, because we thought, well, it's an outdoor store. Surely some of these folks know a good place where you can get in contact with a dealer or a shop or somebody. And of course, that is when we run into y'all. And kind of going back to how I got started in this, my mother had bought me a book for Christmas. It was about 10 years ago when I got started in this, and sure enough, it was called Gone to the Dogs, and I had read it 100 times, and I had seen your picture on there, and I've listened to some other podcasts that you've been on. I turned around, I seen you, I said, at that point, I'd done forgot about the side by side. I said, I've got to go talk to this guy. This is just got to be meant to be. And so it's amazing how it makes a full circle.
Well, that's one of the greatest benefits of the work that I did over the years was the opportunity to meet people like you, Brandon. It was a great experience for me, and I'm sure glad you came over and said hello. That's for sure.
Yes, sir. And I enjoyed talking to Nubbin, too. I don't want to leave him out. I can tell.
Oh, yeah. There's only one of them.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. But the side by side deal, I'm gonna have to I told my uncle we was gonna have to make a video and charge people, but I will say this. You can start and crank a 2015 Kawasaki Mule without a key. it takes some doing and some redneck engineering, but it can be done, I promise you. So we got the thing cranked up, and we might as well got a brand new vehicle. We're so proud of it. we tore up road, I can promise you.
Oh, good. Well, now, was this your first, did you say it was your first trip to the White River Refuge?
Yes, sir. So I probably about, I'd say 3 years of me coon hunting. I had acquired a really nice female. And at that point I was kind of, I'd hunted everywhere that I, had permission around home. And I had actually, the only other place that I've been out of state to hunt is LBL up in Kentucky.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In Aurora, which that's another beautiful place. If you're in the shape to pull those Kentucky knobs, I would recommend it. But if you do not want to walk hills, you better not go there. But I had talked to some other folks that had mentioned that's like, well, you need to go to the White River if you got a dog that'll trim. And so I started looking it up, and I had remembered also your book I had read. Where you had talked about it, and I had run into some folks that are local here. And like I said, the gentleman that I hunted with all these years, Willie Newsom, he had told me about it. He personally had never hunted. They had went and drove through it and kind of scoped it out. One gentleman that had hunted it for several years, he hasn't been in a while. He's a local guy here. His name is David Johnson. I worried him to death asking him about it. I was like, is it really this? Is it really that? And he's a tough man. I have to share. I wish he was here to tell it, but he went one year, and this was obviously before the days of Garmin and Dogtree and all that stuff. And the long story short, the dogs had split, and he went to his and shot the coon out, and he was just going to walk back to where the other dogs was treed with the group he was with. Well, he walked, and he said they shut up, and he said, I'll just keep walking. Well, that was about 9 o'clock that night, and he quit walking when he run into a trapper the next morning at 9 o'clock.
Oh, my goodness.
And
wow.
To say he is a tough man is an understatement. Now, that's a true story. Now, that is a true story. He's Mr. David's 81 now, I believe, and I tell you, he can outdo a lot of young men. I'll say that for sure. But he can cover some ground. There is no doubt.
Well, one of the things, having been raised in the mountains, and we'd go up the holler, up the creek, and back down the creek, and that's about all there was to it. If we went up over the ridge, come back over,
Right. But
right. You get out there, and that land that Delta country is on both sides of the Mississippi River. The Mississippi to the east and Arkansas to the west. It is tabletop flat. And this, but for my listeners, what we do is we hang a light on our buggies.
Yes.
And we also have the Garmin or the, as you say, Dogtree or whatever.
Yes, sir.
But that light helps a lot. If, when you go into a tree, dog, and you start looking up and walking around in circles, you don't know which direction your buggy is, unless you have some help. But, man, that would be I can envision that. There's 160,000 acres to that refuge.
Oh, I mean, it's not hard to do. I mean, I hate to tell this on myself, but I'm on here, so I might as well share it.
Hey, it's your nickel. Go for it.
Just up the road here, I had been hunting a young female, and I was here at Chickasaw State Park, and any of those that are listening that has ever been on it knows there is not a flat place on it.
Correct. I judged squirrel hunt there for PKC
Really?
one time.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking
Yep.
about. It may not be mountains, but it's got plenty of hills and hollers in it.
Yep.
So I didn't have a compass with me, and I had turned loose right off one of the main trails. The Burkhead Trail is actually the trail that I was on, and the dog treed. I could hear her running the track. She fell treed, and like I said, I'd been trying to start her, and I got all worked up, so I just grabbed my gun and my light, and I cut out running. And I got in there. Of course, it was a big old maple tree. It looked big enough you could build a house with it. And I squalled and squalled, couldn't find it. And I was like, my goodness. And I turned her loose again. Instead of going back to the truck, I was like, well, maybe she just pulled up short. And I sent her on. Then I got to walking, and I thought, I never did look at my compass. And because at this time I didn't have no type of Garmin or anything. Well, the long story short, I got lost. I caught her. I said, well, I'll just go to the highway. I can hear the trucks roaring down the highway. This was the night before Thanksgiving. This was probably about 2015. And I keep walking, and I knew once I got into them pine thickets, I done made a bad mistake. I said, yep, I've done got way off course, because the area I was hunting for several hundred yards was nothing but good, big standing hardwood timber. And now I'm walking and wading and fighting through there, and all at once my light dies.
Oh, no.
So I tied my dog off to the tree, and I'm bundled up with her, because that was the night. I'll never forget that it was supposed to get down in the 20s, and I can testify it did. And all of a
Are we
sudden,
having fun yet?
well, I told myself now we're coon hunting.
Yeah.
And
I
so
guess.
it seemed like an eternity went by, and finally I hear a Brandon. I was like, I'm just thinking that. I ain't no way somebody's hollering for me. Well, I hear it 2 or 3 more times, and I just hollered out, yeah. And it ended up being my dad, my mother, and my wife. They ready to call the law and get a search party. And they, of course, I come home. My wife, she didn't want me to go by myself no more. It was a
oh yeah,
it was
they worry about us, and we really do need to think about them. You know.
I tell you, I'm thankful for mine. You know, she is a wonderful mother and a wonderful wife for sure. But that sure did. They both were pretty tore up over that.
Yeah.
But lesson learned. Even today, even though I have a Garmin, I try to tell them before I go where I'm going to be at. And if we change spots, I try to message them and let them know.
Yep.
Just in case something does happen. But before I leave the truck or four-wheeler or whatever the case may be, I'm going to mark it with a compass. And if I got an extra collar, I'm going to leave a collar there. So I have multiple ways of getting back.
Well, it just takes one. My dad used to joke around. He said, I've never been lost. I've been turned around for 2 or 3 days at a time. but I've never been lost. Well, Brandon, being that this was your first year at the White River, what was your impression of the experience? What overall? What would you say about it?
I mean, I'd have to agree with you on. Of course, this is my first time experiencing it. So we shot out a total of 4. We treed 5, which we was only there a couple nights. The first night we was there, the wind was just terrible. We couldn't hardly even hear the dogs. So we called it short that night. The second day when we finally got the side by side up and running, we finally I got to give props where it's due. Murray Reagan,
Yes.
he actually helped us find new territory and kind of showed us where we could go and try. Which one thing I'd like to say, I don't think you appreciate a place like that until you get out and actually walk it and you realize how far it goes, and it's still just wilderness, untouched wilderness. And the timber, I mean, it's just so open and big. I took a picture. Me and my uncle, we was in a cypress down there. It was so big that me nor him, while we was on the inside of it, could reach our arms out and touch either side. You just don't. I mean, I thought I had seen big trees around here. Like I've hunted the Hatchie River bottom several times, and there is some big trees there. But it's a beautiful place. It was worth the drive just going to see it. And just to be able to walk and free cast a dog time and time again and not having to worry about a road or a neighboring property where someone's going to have a problem with you being around them. I mean, it made it for, I almost want to say, relaxing experience, just because you wasn't worried about none of that stuff.
Yeah. I experienced that 15 years ago, Brandon, and that's what calls me back. That and the fellowship of my buddies, you know.
And I know there's a lot of people there that knock down a lot more coons, but honestly, the miles that we put in, I bet I only found enough acorns to fill up your front pocket. I mean, that part did blow my mind, which I had talked to several people that said pretty much the same thing, that they just didn't have a good crop this year, which Mr. David Johnson, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, he always said if you could ever get into hackberry trees down there, that you usually do real good. So,
well, yeah, we got into a lot of hackberries one year down on the South Unit, way down around Alligator Lake, Moon Lake area down there.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, it was a down year for what we call mast, back in the mountains of nuts and berries and so forth. And the acorns obviously is the standard, the staple, you know, for the deer and the coons and everything else.
And I'm not sure about down there, but I know, like, here around the house, out of all the different acorn trees we have, it seems like in my short coon hunt career around here, I have caught the most coons in a pin oak. It seems like they prefer them over, say, like a white oak.
Yeah, well, like back in the mountains, the white oak is the preferred oak, you know, and then we've got red oaks and black oaks and all that. But my friend Matt Collins had told me early on, before we came down this year, that the acorn crop was virtually non-existent, and that deer and coons, you know, were pretty scarce. So we knew that going in.
Yes.
So that was your experience too. Without asking you to pinpoint your hunting spots and all, did you hunt the North or the South Unit or both?
I ended up just hunting the South.
Okay.
We was thinking about hunting the North, but everyone I had talked to, you know, of course, like I say, my first time, they could have. It's kind of like a new convert. They could have told me the sky was purple. I'd have said amen. You know, I was just going by people that had been there. But we tried the South just because everyone we had talked to in camp said that the North side just had been hit so hard they really weren't doing that good on that end. We did, however, drive it during the daytime, and I mean, like I said, I was just amazed at just how beautiful the place was. I mean, I don't care what type of game you're in pursuit of, that place has got it somewhere. I mean, It
Oh
is
yeah,
just
there's
beautiful.
hogs, bear, and all that, which we haven't encountered there around where we hunt.
Well,
Uh,
see, we did run up on a hog, and I kept telling my uncle, I said, we're going to have to find out if these dogs are going to trash on one or not, because I can even smell them, and it got stronger and stronger.
mm,
We heard one wolf at us, and
mhm.
about, I don't know, 50 yards ahead of us, I seen it.
Well,
And
you know what I do. My remedy for that is I hunt a plot dog, and everything on earth's afraid of them. So
I understand.
hunters, dogs, game, it doesn't matter.
I do understand. I
Yeah.
do understand.
Well,
But
uh,
they
uh,
definitely,
yeah. Well, do you plan to go back?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Anybody that has never went, just just to see it is worth it. I mean, because
Mhm.
like I say, we were talking about Chickasaw. In the past 5 years, they have cut more timber off of that place than I have ever seen. They cut out 80-acre blocks, and you don't think
Mm-mm-mm.
that adds up, but I'm telling you, it does. I mean, there's haulers that used to be prime real estate that you could carry a halfway dog and it would look like $1 million, and now you can't even drag a snake through it. So
Mm.
to go down there and to see a place that, as I said, it's just virtually been untouched, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Well, there are areas, and I sadly say, and the ones that I've witnessed have been on the North Unit, but where they are timbering like that. And
Yes, sir.
I don't get it. I don't know. I know they want to open up the upper story and create browse for the deer and all that stuff. I know all the arguments, but man, that's virgin timber in there. I mean, you don't get that back in a lifetime, and certainly not in what I have left. But, well, Brandon, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. I'd like to get you back on another podcast where we can talk longer. By design, this podcast is going to be talking to 3 or 4 guys like yourself to get their experiences this year. Was there anything there that happened aside from your adventure with your side-by-side and so forth, anything that stood out to you particularly besides the beauty of the place?
I would say, as far as something that stood out, is I knew there was going to be, probably quite a few coon hunters, but until we started driving through the middle of the area we was at, I told my uncle, I said, if there's a coon in these woods after all these dogs get turned loose tonight, it'll have to be a miracle. I, I have never been to a place where there was that many coon hunters about to hunt the same place. I mean, which I
Yeah.
know the Bible tells it a little differently, but I said, if there's a heaven on earth, it's got to be this right here.
Yeah. Well, that's my experience with hunting the South Unit. You get into a lot more hunters. Now one of the areas we like to hunt is only open for the first couple of weeks of the season, and then they
Okay,
close it on December 1st in the North
really?
Unit. So, yeah, it's just a small portion of the North Unit up there, but it's an area that we really like to hunt. But we missed it this year. We decided to go, the Monday after Thanksgiving. So that bumped
And
us already into December. And the South Unit opens in December, and that particular area, the North Unit closes, on the 1st of December. So,
And well, another thing that I wanted to mention that really, and this could be probably a whole nother podcast, but what amazed me is the deer hunters that would come out and talk to you and be like, hey, if you're coon hunting, I've seen some right over here where my stand's at. And just the ability for folks that are obviously pursuing 2 different types of game, but actually get along with one another and try to help each other out. I mean, I didn't have a cross meeting with anybody. I mean, everybody was real nice and hospitable.
Well, that's and
all of them, but
go ahead.
around here there's a lot of them that if you mention coon hunting, it's kind of the low hanging
Well,
fruit.
you know what, Brandon? I want to try to be as nice as I can here, and that's exactly right about the Arkansas hunters. We have experienced in the 15 years I've been going, I have never heard one cross word from a deer hunter. I've never heard any, and like our experience, you know, you're sitting there sometimes waiting for sunset and they're coming out of the woods and they'll stop and they'll ask or tell you, you know, boy, I saw a bunch of coons. We always ask them, you know, how'd you do? Did you see any deer? Yada, yada. Very, very, they're sportsmen. They're sportsmen. The hunters that you are talking about, now this is going to get a little rough, are ignorant, they're jerks, and they have no concept of what hunting really is about.
Yes, sir.
And the country is full of them. Their arrogance precedes them. You can depend when you talk to them. And they... As my mother, who lived to be 100 years old, they know about as much about hunting as a frog knows when Sunday comes.
Right.
Now, that's just about as plain as I can put it.
Right.
And if people don't like that out there, then you know, it's my podcast. That's all I can tell you.
I put it this way. My uncle that you met, we've coon hunted on his farm. And literally 10 yards from where he shot a really nice buck this year, we've treed coons on the place.
Right.
So I think it's not as a factor of running deer off. I think it's more so as there's gentlemen that are not being real with their ability as a hunter.
Yeah, correct. And, you know, and to get off my soapbox, you know, they just don't understand.
Yes, sir.
They're not woodsmen. They're not true hunters.
There's enough for everybody. You know,
absolutely.
We was talking about this the other day at work, which I'm kind of jumping around here. I apologize doing that, but you know, I look at that just like, you know, this election is that we just had. When people come together for the greater good, for the big picture, and we work together, it's incredible what we can get accomplished.
Exactly. And, you know, my mind goes back to West Virginia. I listened to a podcast yesterday on the W Hunting Supply Network, and they're talking about there's a pending legislation in Arizona now to end hound hunting, and it's similar to what was done in Colorado, and thankfully we won that fight. But it takes me back to Michigan, to the days when we were faced with a referendum to stop bear hunting with hounds and overbait, and how we countered with a proposal that we put the management of the wildlife resource in the hands of the experts in the wildlife agencies, in the DNR and so forth, and get it out of the hands of the politicians. And that subject came up in this podcast. And I'm sitting driving down the road. I drove back home from Alabama, from Nubbins yesterday. And I'm like, man, I want to get on there. But it's a podcast. It's a week late.
Right.
But yeah, you know, we all have to. Oh, what I was going to tell you, the point I was going to make is we were able to convince the hunters of Michigan, and there's at that time 750,000 deer licenses sold, or deer hunters bought licenses. And we were able to convince them that this is not a bear hunting issue. It's not a hound issue. It's not a bait issue. It's a hunting issue. These people want to stop hunting. It doesn't matter who they stop first. They want to stop it all. you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Brandon, I thank you so much for coming on with me today. I know it's in the middle of a work week and you're back from a hunting trip, and I know you probably have a honey-do list as long as my arm.
Yes, it stays that way, but that's all.
I got you, buddy, but I sure thank the good Lord for allowing us to meet at Webb's. And if you're ever out there to DeWitt, Arkansas, they don't pay me a dime, but it's a pretty nice little store to go in. They got just about everything in there.
I don't think a man would find it hard to spend some money in there. I can promise.
No, they always get a little of mine before I get out of there.
Right. Which I did recommend them if they needed to start carrying some more hound supplies, they would up their income a little bit.
I'm sure, especially for about a month or so out of the year in December and early November. All right. Well, Brandon, go ahead. I'm sorry.
They sell that and side-by-side keys.
Yeah, or at least have a mechanic on duty there, right? Well, that's the challenge out there. The little towns, we either have to kind of, from where we stay, you got to go all the way up to Clarendon to get groceries or go to DeWitt. And either way from our camp, DeWitt's about 30 miles.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we stayed there in St. Charles. So it was about that much for us as well.
Yeah, I think you stayed there at the campground where Murray stays, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and
yes.
That's just right across the road from where we stayed for 4 years. The High Plains Waterfowl. You probably could see the building there.
But seen that. Kind of thought that was another place to stay, but it looked like it was nice over there.
Yeah, it was a great place to stay, but the guy that we rented from sold it, and I don't know what the new owner's intentions are or whatever, but it's set up real nice as a duck lodge, and with a big, open lounging area and a commercial kitchen and all. It's a nice deal, but all right, Brandon Taylor. What's that town again?
The little community I live in is called Montezuma, but I guess if you're going to connect it to something you can find real quick on the map, it would be Henderson, Tennessee.
Henderson.
They actually filmed most of the movie Walking Tall.
I knew you'd going to bring Buford Pusser in on this thing somewhere.
Yeah, we carry big sticks and walk quietly around here.
Right.
No doubt.
Well, Brandon, it's been great to visit with you, my friend, and thank you once again for coming on the Gone to the Dogs podcast. And we hope to see you at the White River next year, if not before.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I am honored to be on this. This is cool is not a good enough word for it. It's been great.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the experience. You were a great guest.
I guess the only thing I'd like to add is just, everybody, we love the sport so much, but as you said earlier, we do need to value the ones that are at home while we're out. I've always said you need to keep God first, family, and then have your hounds after that, and it'll all work out. So.
That's great. I'm glad that you added that. You could not have spoken truer words, my friend. Okay, folks, we're going to have another guest coming up just in a minute after this. Well, here we go with the second segment of our White River recap for 2024. And I can remember back when the year 2000, all the computers were going to crash and we were all going to go up in smoke. And here we are 24 years later. I'm very privileged to have a fellow on at this time that I actually met in the woods while we were hunting on the White River Refuge. And I have Mr. John Staib with me from Pea Ridge, Arkansas. How you doing, John?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I think I've rested up a bit from my travels. I had a long day yesterday. We're recording on a Tuesday, and I left the White River on Sunday morning with my buddies, Nubbin Moore and Keith Durkee, and we headed back toward Birmingham and overnighted at Nubbin's and then made that long drive down to Florida yesterday. So I'm doing pretty good for an old guy. Rested up pretty well. How about you? How many days did you guys hunt out there?
So we hunted 3 nights. We got down there Thursday, and then our first dump right out of the box, we ran into you guys. So we kicked it off like right off the bat. We got right in the action. So and then we hunted Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and we come home Sunday as well.
I got you. Now you had 2 fellows with you. Let's identify your partners in crime there that were with you.
So the youngest one there is my son, my oldest son, Aaron.
Yeah.
And he's 20 years old and been hunting since he was about 12, I think, is when we got back into it.
Cool.
And then the other fellow that was with me is my cousin Joe, Joe Epling, and we basically, me and him basically grew up like he was more like an older brother than a cousin.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we've been together a long time and hunted together off and on, and everything, deer, coons, turkeys, you name it. We've done a bunch of stuff together, fishing and everything else. So
that's cool. Now you're from up in the northwest corner of Arkansas, right?
Yes, sir. Right? I was actually born and raised just across the line in Missouri, but I've been in Arkansas now since 2001. Really, I spent a few years back in Missouri, but mostly been in Arkansas since then.
I see.
Well, I guess I'm from Arkansas, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of identify with Missouri a little bit. My dad was a pipe fitter, and occasionally the jobs weren't close to home. He worked mainly up and down the Ohio Valley between West Virginia and Ohio, but he was building a plant or helping to build a plant out at Keville, Kentucky, near Paducah, and a plant that they used to diffuse uranium for the atom bomb. But anyway, we lived in Charleston, Missouri, right across the river from Cairo, Illinois. And so I went to first grade in the state of Missouri. So I guess maybe a little bit of my show me attitude that was established back in those days.
At a good early age.
Yeah.
Got you off on the right foot.
Yeah, always. That part of the country is pretty cool out there. I remember going out with my dad duck hunting on a Saturday morning. I saw more ducks than I'd ever seen in my life along that Mississippi flyway. And then when I go out to the White River, I get to see all the geese. So that's kind of cool too. All right. Well, John, what's your backstory a little bit on this coon hunting gig?
So I started, we were like a lot of families, the hunting and trapping was a big part of how Christmas was paid for and how, school clothes were bought and things like that. And so, man, my uncles were hunting. They were hunting before I could remember, and at a very early age wanted to go with them. And most of the time they wouldn't let me go, but occasionally they'd let me go. And so I was born in 80, so I got to witness some of that high coon price, and I was actively at the fur shed constantly, skinning, hanging out with my uncles or my brother-in-law, learning how to skin and take care of the pelts and all that stuff. And we always stretched them and dried them and scraped them and all that stuff and sent them up to Canada. Yeah. So I was always a part of that whole, part of it, even early on. And then
cool.
As I got older and got where I could do more on my own, I got my first coon hound that was mine. The summer between my 8th grade year and my freshman year of school. And so what are you, about 13, 14, somewhere right in that area?
Yeah, I'd say.
Right in there. And it was a gray dog, that an English dog, that was we knew the parents, something got messed up on his sire side, that that dog never got papered. The dog was a full blood English dog that come from Ralph Hendricks. If anybody knows who Ralph Hendricks is, Hendricks Ozark Mac was his big dog back in that day.
Let me interrupt you just a minute, John. Some of my plot friends will say, whoa, Ralph Hendricks was not an Englishman. He was a plot man. There was a very well-known plot man in South Carolina named Ralph Hendricks. Yeah, he was very prominent in the breed for many years. Yeah, but anyway, I'll let you go.
This Ralph Hendricks is from Washburn, Missouri.
Okay.
And that gentleman remained a mentor of mine all through growing up. If I had a problem with the dog, couldn't figure something out, he was the guy I went to. He had done a lot of training, a lot of working with hounds and stuff, and was pretty well known in this area. Played some parts in some other kennels later on whenever he got out of it. Sold a lot of females out and stuff, and helped a lot of other kennels out with what he had going on. But so that was my first dog, about 13 years old, and he turned into an actual pretty nice hound. Regardless of my efforts to mess him up, he managed to make a coon hound anyway. And treat a lot of coons with that little dog. And it was actually the first dog that I put in a competition hunt. As the prices of furs, dropped off, we continued to hunt, and I hunted year round, especially once I could drive. I was just ate up with it. I coon hunted all the time. I was just enamored with it. And my uncles started doing walker dogs.
Yeah.
And they had bought a walker dog and wanted to promote it, and had so eventually we ended up with puppies, a lot of puppies coming out of that hound. And so I got kind of deemed the pup trainer, I guess you could say. And so I was getting out of school, coming home, teaching them how to lead, load, come to you, putting a handle on them.
Yeah.
And all those things, and then starting them in the woods, live trapping coons, getting them going, and then we would sell them off. And so I did a bunch of puppies that way. I felt like back then I kind of had a knack for a little bit, and I feel like as I've gotten older, I've lost a little bit of that touch for some reason. Either that or the dogs have changed.
Is it a patience factor? As we get older and get busier, and times greater or lesser supply, it seems. I know for me, it seems that way.
I think that is probably a big part of it. You really, in this right now in my life, if I'm going to mess with a dog, it needs to start cooperating pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have, the time to that. And I've gained a little knowledge along the way. You pick up on things, and not that I'm right every time, but within a few weeks, this dog's got some brains or it doesn't have some brains.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Or this dog has a nose, or maybe not so much. You can kind of see some things early on that I couldn't see early on before, that I just kind of plowed through.
Yeah.
So I'm probably a little quicker to make a judgment on a call than I was back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
But as I grew up there and went through school, I continued to do that and started competition hunting a little bit. My brother-in-law continued to trap, and he is by far, he still traps to this day. Why, I'm not for sure, but he does. And he loves it. He's absolutely enamored with it still to this day. And he is one of the best trappers I've ever even heard of. And it's incredible how good he is at trapping, and it doesn't matter what he just has a knack for it. And I have a lot of respect for him in that regard.
Sounds like my friend Randy Smith in Pennsylvania, and he began very, very young, trapping muskrats and so forth, and he became just, obsessed with it, trapped all over the country, and it's sad to see what's happened to trapping,
it really is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Well, with the whole fur bearer market, in general, it's sad to see what's happened to it. A renewable resource is not being utilized at all.
Yep, exactly. We had this conversation around camp, this year at the White River. Exactly.
Well, my sister, who's Tim's wife, she has gotten pretty creative in her ways to sell the fur. And the bones and the I'm not even sure what all they do, to be honest with you, but they travel around and they sell their wares. She makes jewelry, all kinds of different stuff out of it. They've started tanning their own. They've really gotten very creative with their process of dealing with the trapping part of it. But anyway, not to fall off on that subject too, because I could talk about that quite a bit as well. But as I got older and continued hunting, I was also a musician, and at one point, as I mentioned before we started the podcast, I've spent a lot of time in the studio, and so at one point I was playing music and coon hunting. That's all I did.
I got you. What genre?
And country music.
There's only two kinds I heard way back.
Country and western. And you got to know how to play both of them.
That's right. Those dad jokes travel.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I would be going on the road playing music, and then I would come home, get off the bus, and immediately be in the woods hunting and training dogs and stuff. And that's what I did for about 3 years, just pretty much nonstop.
You want to drop some names? Yeah. Did you play with somebody that we would recognize?
So I opened. We had a group.
Yeah.
And we had some success on the radio as an independent label, and that kind of thing. But I opened up for almost every major star there was in the 90s. Shared the stage with.
Yeah.
Everyone from Reba McEntire to Randy Travis, Faith Hill, a bunch of those people, and everybody in between.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely was we the headlining act. We was always an opening act for them. And on some of those stages, we were early on in the day, but we got to do some big stuff. Cool. Colorado Country Jam and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'll interject that real quick. My first cousin, Ted Green, has a company called Modern Management in Nashville, and he manages Josh Turner. He had Sarah Evans. He had Diamond Rio. Still does, I think, and several of those. Kenny Rogers, I think, at one time. And also, my dad was a fiddle player, grew up playing barn dances and things there in Middle Tennessee. And then my brother kind of followed along. He plays drums and started off traveling with a Southern gospel group back east. Then, one thing led to another. But, that's always very interesting to me. What's your instrument?
Well, I am a drummer by trade.
Oh, are you?
I've been playing drums since I was about 5 years old.
Awesome.
I can play a couple other instruments, just enough to get by. I made a living at it for a while.
Well, you don't have to learn the words and stuff, right, when you're a drummer?
Well, the last group that I did was we have a lot of casinos right here in this area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so I put together my own group, and I actually fronted the band from the drums and sang 95% of the material. So,
great!
that's a lot of work.
If we wanted to find some of your work, is it available like on Amazon or anywhere?
It used to be. I don't know if you could find any of them old albums or not.
Yeah.
The stuff that was recorded was in the 90s.
I get you.
Really before a lot of the streaming platforms and stuff took place.
I see.
I'm not even sure where you find it.
Well, it's still very cool. I love music. I've always loved music. And I've had Trenton Williams on here one time, a bluegrass picker, from over in eastern Ohio that's a coon hunter. And we talked about it, Autumn Oaks this year. They had a show with Daniel Patrick, who is a banjo player, and he's done the Grand Ole Opry several times and all that. Just amazing musician and also. Anyway, well, we chased that rabbit into the deep weeds, but that's just very cool to me. Yeah.
I've got it since you mentioned Diamond Rio.
Yeah.
I ran state cross country my senior year of high school, and went from Jeff City, Missouri, to Lincoln, Nebraska, and played my first professional gig on the road. I went from there to, I think it was Great Falls, Montana, where I opened up for Diamond Rio.
How about
that? That was my second gig as a professional drummer. Was opening up for Diamond Rio.
Yeah, they're a good bunch of guys. We always ding our cousin whenever they're going to be anywhere around, I'll usually ask him, kind of pick up a couple tickets and back, meet and greet and back stage pass or whatever. And my cousin in Texas, we call him Butch. Dad laughs about him. Butch wants enough for to bring a busload,
Oh, yeah.
but we're kind of proud of our cousin Ted and what he's been able to accomplish in the music industry, and all. And it's been great.
That's a hard industry to be successful in, that's for sure.
Yeah, I imagine for sure. Okay, so how did
back to the coon hunting?
How did you? Yeah, let's. How did you get interested in the White River? Since this show is about the White River,
you bet. So I took a break from coon hunting in early 2000. Had kids and all that kind of stuff, and moved to Arkansas. And ever since I moved to Arkansas, I had heard about the White River. Even though I wasn't hunting, I'd heard how awesome it was. There was just coons everywhere. It was like, for lack of a better term, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. You dump a coon out, or dump a dog out, you tree a coon. There was coons setting up everywhere. It was just crazy. And so, and I'd heard about this, for years coming on. Right. And then I started hunting again whenever my oldest son got old enough, which was about 11, 12 years old. We started hunting again. I was single dad there for a while and had my kids. And so hunting really wasn't an real thing for me at the time. So we got back into it, and I always wanted to come down and go down there. Mm-hmm. And so this year I just decided I'm going. Yeah. And so I made plans. My wife thought I was crazy because I did Autumn Oak last year. Mm-hmm. And I said, I had such a good time. I'm going back again next year. So we went this year also. And I'm like, I'm going to White River. And she's like, you're just going to take all your vacation to go coon hunting. I'm like, well, I've been wanting to do it for years, so I'm going to do it. So we did. Yeah. Good for you. I planned as best as I could and prepared and my dogs weren't ready, but everything else was. I wanted to take my side by side, and it needed some work and all that kind of stuff. And so, I probably should have concentrated more on the dogs now that I've been down there. But honestly,
it was a tough year. And we'll talk about that. But it was a tough year, probably the toughest I remember in my, as I said, 15 years ago when over there.
I was really surprised by that, and honestly, I brought a little boat, a little John boat in case we got behind water, and brought side by side. And we camped there at the campers retreat there at St. Charles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just right there, and so we had turned our dogs out there whenever we ran into you guys.
Right.
So you guys left, and my little female was getting treed back there behind us.
Yep.
And you guys went off. Well, about the time you guys drove off, that the big red English dog and the little Walker dog that was his name Keith that went to the dogs?
Yes, Keith Durkee.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Keith had seen them, and you'd seen the red dog come by your truck.
Right.
They got treed, actually before my Lucy female did. And so we headed to them. And when we got in there, they were behind water. By that whatever, I don't remember the name of that lake that was at the end of that road.
I think were we on Hog's Head Lake right there?
That may have been it. Yeah, I think so. And so they were on the other side of a branch that we could not get around. So we had to go get the boat, paddle across the lake, up that branch, and get them out of there. That was about a 2-hour or so fiasco. And so we got started right off the bat. We were just putting the pedal to the metal, I guess. If it was going to go wrong, it was going to go wrong right off the bat. Turn loose on you guys. Dogs get behind water. And so we started off the night. And then it was pretty cold that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the time we got
colder
done,
than usual every
was it?
night.
I wondered if it was.
Yeah, it was colder than usual this year. Early in the week, we had some pretty stiff winds. I don't remember. What night of the week was that we bumped into?
That was Thursday night.
Okay. Yeah.
So by the time we got done with that, when I paddled the boat out of there, and there was, ice on the boat, and the seat where the paddle had gone across the boat back and forth was all frozen up, and the ground was frozen up, and so, but we went around to another spot. I wanted to turn loose again, and my little female went. She was a little over a mile and a half from the truck and had never gotten struck. And we were like, oh, okay. Yeah. We're, so I toned her back and we called it a night. I figured if she didn't get nothing going in a mile and a half, it probably wasn't going to happen. And so we went back. Of course, we'd driven down that day. And so we were pretty tired anyway. And it was already after midnight. And so we called it a night. And then, the next night we went to, or the next day we went and did a little scouting on the south unit.
Right.
And, scouted around down there, like what we saw. The other thing that we noticed on the north unit is there was a lot of hunters. Mm-hmm. We ran into, whenever Lucy was doing her 1.5 mile trek from the truck, we ran into 2 different groups. And there was you could hear dogs everywhere you went. There was always a dog treed somewhere in the distance. So we decided to go to South Unit on the second night.
You saw more dogs?
No, we saw less.
Really?
We just saw. We honestly thought we might see more.
Mm-hmm. I would think so.
Yeah, and because it's only open for a short
right.
amount of time.
2 weeks.
We really figured it. Yeah. So we really figured it would be getting hammered, and we saw that night. We saw one dog treed on a trail. We were driving through a trail, and the guy was shining the tree, and then he must have recut off that tree, and his dog came by us, an English dog. And we heard a dog way off in the distance a time or two, but that was the only guy we saw. Mm-hmm. And we hunted till 3 or 4 in the morning that night, 3 in the morning, I think, before we got done. And so we turned loose right at dark, just shortly after dark. Yeah. And so now the later in the night once midnight rolled around, we didn't hear anybody else.
Right.
On the
they
way
must have been
out,
all old timers like us my buddies and me.
Well, we were so frustrated, to be honest with you. It was like, we have got to tree a coon on the outside. I'm not giving up, because we were making dens. It was den tree after den tree.
Yeah.
And so it was a matter of willpower that we were still out there. It was a den tree, slick tree fiasco. And I maybe should have paid more attention to my dogs than I did getting all the equipment ready to go. But it was just a sheer willpower that we were still out there. We just wanted to see a coon. Yeah. But as it got later on in the night, we saw less. And I think on the way out of there, we did see a guy loading up his stuff on the way out. Mm-hmm. But we really didn't. That was about it.
Well, it depends on where you go, I guess. And that's,
It does.
Yeah. Now, we hunted up on the north end of the South Unit a little bit. Now, I didn't go with those guys. Our group is 8 guys, so guys are going different directions. We kind of split up and try to move around and hunt with different ones. I think Nubbin and I've gotten relegated to the old folks cast. It seems like we end up hunting together more than anybody else. And Keith is such a great guy. You mentioned him earlier about going in there. Now he's going to go to the dogs, and I shouldn't. It's kind of a blasphemy for me to have a podcast called "Gone to the Dogs," because the older I get, the less I go. If there's an opportunity to sit in a buggy, I tend to do that, but anymore. But anyway, it was, before you get too hard on your dogs, we had some really nice dogs in camp. And of course, Trey Perrin from Alabama hunted in the pro sport hunt that was there in St. Charles, or there at Indian Bay, and ended up placing second in the hunt and took home a nice check to Alabama.
You bet.
But and he said they treed 6 singles on the late round cast. They had 3 dog casts. Oh. But that wasn't the norm. I think we started off maybe on Monday night, but collectively we had caught 10. And I think 11 or vice versa the following night. And then from there on, and then the third night we hunted, we didn't catch a coon, not one raccoon. And then for the rest of the week, for those 3 remaining nights, it was 2 or 3 a night. And that was, and we've never been real big on counting coons. It's been a lot more about the just getting together and having fun, but. And
that's what this trip was for us as well, an opportunity to go have fun together and do something, All
right. So did you end up catching a coon down on the South Unit?
We did not.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me this year. It does not surprise me.
One of the dogs in our repertoire there is a pretty nice hound. She's a Grand Night PKC champion. I mean, she's treated 1,000 kids in her lifetime.
The blue female, right? English female.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And but we really struggled. And we were that second night we were on the north side of that South Unit.
Right.
Is where we were hunting at.
I imagine I know pretty close to where you were hunting.
Yeah. There's that trail that runs up that river arm that basically circles all the way around in there. And we were a couple miles, up around that trail and stuff, and utilize that trail to get back in there. Mm-hmm. If I could offer somebody, if anybody listens to this and wants a piece of advice on going to the White River.
Absolutely.
I ran into a guy at the Max Prairie Wing shop
in Stuttgart.
And I'm telling you, in Stuttgart there, and he's like, "Oh man, you ought to go around to the east side and drive that levee out, and there's some really good stuff in there." Mm-hmm. Well, we drove that levee out, and we didn't find any good stuff. There's no trails over there to speak of.
Well,
And
most
it
of the
is a
guys
long way around
Yeah.
there.
Did you go in like down to Ethel and go across over toward the east side?
We went
Did you go all the way
out
down
Highway
to
1
Yeah.
and went south to get on that east side of the levee road.
Mm-hmm.
And so we maybe did not go the right way. We
How
come in
far
from the
down
north.
were you? Were you down to the extreme south end of the south unit?
Well, we drove for so long
Yeah.
that we finally were like, this is not, and you know, you could see the river, you know, basically the whole way as we were driving, and some of it was private mixed in, that eventually we just were like, okay, we're going too far we're either got to turn back or this is not it. We're so far in.
Well, there's
And
a
so there was
levee
a
down
county
there.
road that cut.
Yeah. Did you get on the levee?
Yes, sir, we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
We drove that.
about 15 miles or so of that, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a county road that cuts back through to the highway off that levee road.
Mm-hmm.
And we got on that and we went back out to the highway and come around and then come in. You know, we went west of St. Charles there and went south to, is that Ethel over there? Or what's that name of that? Where you come in there and cross the bridge?
Yeah, that little town down there. That's Elaine. No, that's Ethel. Elaine is on down, I think.
Elaine's the other one. Yeah. So we went in Ethel way, and that's how we ended up over there that second night. But we had driven way, I don't know, we had been on that levee road for miles and
Well,
miles.
see,
and didn't
years
see anything of it.
ago, some friends of ours from North Carolina would come out together in one pickup. And I talked to them this year, and they had kind of heard the forecast, and they decided they were going to hunt land between the lakes this year over in Kentucky, and didn't come. But anyway, they used to hunt off that levee just out of the pickup. They would just,
really?
They would just stop along the levee and cast the dogs toward the river. And, that's how they hunted it. And back in the day, they caught a lot of coons down there, you know.
Well, I would say that if there was a place to catch them and you were brave enough to turn your dogs in there, that'd be the place to do it. Because I can't imagine that there's a lot of people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
From what I could see, you know, for one thing, the risk of the dogs swimming the river or getting in the river.
Yeah. Well, you don't want your
one
dog to swim the White River.
Oh no. Yeah, we were. That's what our fear was. We'd get in there, and we got one walker dog in our group there that she's crazy. She's crazy enough to try to swim the White River. So we were like, we are not sending her in there for sure. So
okay.
Yeah, but anyway, that's my little 2 cents on that. I would stay away from that if it was me.
Well, let me paint a little picture for you here. It used to be when I first went out there, the first year was 2009. We had planned to go, but the river got up and there was too much water and they closed the refuge. So my first year was 2010, and you could still see the high water mark there at Maddox Bay where the water had been up. It's incredible to me that bay could get up that high. What Maddox Bay, and I'm sure you know this, but it's just a loop off of the White River. It loops back to the east and then south and then rejoins the White River. But my experience, my first few years of hunting the White River was pulling out to a trailhead somewhere, unloading the four-wheelers. I don't think anybody had a side-by-side at that time. And just, you know, we had crates or boxes on the back of our four-wheelers. And we'd just go down. As soon as we hit the road, you know, we'd stop. We'd turn a dog or two to the right and there, and soon they'd get struck pretty quick and be treed about as quick. And guys would head to those and they said, well, while you're going to that, we're going to cut ours this way. And we cut off the other side of the trail. And we just kind of piggybacked that, all night and treed lots and lots of coons. And it was like that for several years. And I imagine that it will be like that again. But I think the drought was really tough on the acorn crop this year. And, the feed, I learned this as a kid hunting bears and squirrels and not to mention coons in the mountains. If the mass crop or the nuts don't hit, the game leaves. They're just not
they're
there.
going to go find food.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, my old throat's about to give out on me here. Well, what about night number 3? How'd you do?
So the third night, we went to the south side of the South Unit, and went down to where the power line trail is. Where that's at, and we started there.
Yeah,
and we hunted. It went about the same, just mostly den trees, slicks. And then we were back in there about 1.5 miles on that power line trail. And me and my cousin Joe, we went to the dogs, and I had my son go get the side by side and bring it around to a spot where we were going to be closer to a trail. And he got up there, and I'm not really for sure what happened, but the long story short is we had a dead battery on that side by side.
Oh no.
And so we're 1.5 miles back in there. And Aaron and Joe walk out after we finally figured out something wasn't right, he wasn't coming with the side. So we got together. Aaron and Joe walk out to the truck to try to find some help. And I went back to the side by side. I thought, if I hear a dog treed, I'm just going to go to that dog and see if those guys will help us out.
Okay.
And and I don't know these guys. Never met them until that night. But there was a couple of guys from Hot Springs, Arkansas. And one of them's name was Joel. And for the life of me, I can't remember the other boy's name. But they got treated in there, and I walked to them, and they were awesome. They helped us out, rode me back out, got a battery, rode me back in, got the side by side started, and away we went. But
that's awesome.
My son went searching for help whenever he got back. He hopped in the truck, and he ran into a group from Tennessee, and they were not willing to help. And I thought, how sad is that? That those guys were, they just didn't want to unload their side by side and go help. I mean, that's just what it pulled down to. And so
incredible.
I was pretty disappointed. And I don't know those guys, never met them, never seen them. That I was pretty ashamed of, to be a coon hunter in that regard. And those, when I heard that, however, he did drive around, oddly enough, to a deer hunting camp. And those guys were more than willing to help. Gave him a battery jump pack thing. And by the time I got headed back out of there, with Joel and that other fella from Hot Springs, Aaron was headed back in with that little jumper pack. And we managed to get it all together and get out of there. But by then, we had it.
Oh,
and,
I imagine.
And so all that preparation with my equipment and ended up letting me down.
Well, as I said, we can never forecast, what Mother Nature, as we say, is going to do to the hunting situation, But this was an exceptionally poor year, I thought. Yeah. As far as coon, that's the poorest commentary on a group of coon hunters I think that I've heard in a long, long time. And I hope if those guys are listening to this podcast, they'll know that I'm very, very disappointed in those fellas.
Well, I can't say that I don't agree with you, because I just, I ran into a whole bunch of coon hunters, more coon hunters than I'd ever seen in my entire life in 3 nights of hunting, and they were everybody was just like the night we met you guys.
Yeah.
Just super grateful, gracious to meet each other and glad to see one another. And, just that camaraderie of fellow houndsmen out there doing our thing, and dogs get mixed up, and that's all right. And, the whole deal was just a ton of fun. Everything didn't go right, as it rarely does. But we had a blast, and we met a lot of cool people. And unfortunately, there seems, there's always got to be one, I guess they say. And unfortunately, that group was the one. And I was really disappointed whenever Aaron told me that they weren't willing to help.
Yeah.
Simply because they didn't want to unload a side by side, and but there was somebody who was, and somebody who did, and we were super grateful to those guys.
Yeah,
I wish to goodness I could remember that other guy's name. I'm really sorry about that if you listen to this podcast. But his dog did tree a coon while I was with him, so I got to see that.
Well,
unfortunately, it was a walker dog.
Yeah, how about that? Well, it was a joy to meet you. Our previous guest, Brandon Taylor, was the guy we ran into in the sporting goods store, and he was on his first trip to White River, and he had similar problems. They lost the key to their side by side, and before they ever got to unload it off the trailer, and they were eventually able to wire it over somehow, and they were able to use it in the latter part of the week. But that's all, things happen in the sport of coon hunters, and we're such a small number. The numbers of actual hunters in the United States is a very small portion of the population. And then when you take the coon hunters out of that overall group of hunters, which encompasses, of course, deer hunters, turkey hunters, and all the rest, we're a very, very, very small slice of the pie. And, we have to help each other. Now, by the same token, at the same time up in Ohio, there was a benefit hunt for fellow coon hunter Eric Pyatt, who is battling cancer. And they raised, I think my friend Randy Smith told me something like $13,000 for him and his family. And that's awesome. So coon hunters do an awful lot of good, but it hurts. I guess it's just like that bad kid in a good family, I wonder how in the world did that kid turn out that way? Well, it makes me think, how in the world did a group of guys there with the means, with the wherewithal to go and help a fellow coon hunter and refuse to do so? That's just totally blows my mind.
Well, I felt the same way. I sure did. I was pretty disappointed in those guys, and they may hear this and not care, and that's all right. I'm just
obviously
I'm just a guy out there trying to do my thing, but I hope that if I ever run into them broke down on the side of the road, I hope that I have the wherewithal to stop and take the time to help those guys out in turn. So,
that would be the thing to do, but I would have to think hard about it.
Well, for their sake, I don't know who they are. So,
that's right. And I don't, and I haven't questioned you about what they looked like or what they were driving.
No,
I don't think we need to pick the scab off of it. But well, I appreciate you, John, for coming on. I enjoyed meeting you and your cousin and your son there briefly. And or was that your uncle? You said a cousin or an uncle?
A cousin and a son.
Yeah. And that little blue female was sounding good when we left. I don't remember exactly what we did that night, but like I said earlier, I think the first 2 nights we caught a few coon, and then it was like 2 or 3 each night from there on. And we did have a blank on Wednesday night. So, and I'm talking about spreading out and hunting areas that, we've hunted there for several years. So it wasn't like we were, green at it. But
you bet, yeah.
Of course, I took the safe route. I took a soon-to-be 5-month-old pup, so nobody expected him to do anything, and he did end up treeing a coon one night. So.
I saw that. That's pretty awesome.
Well, he had a little help. We kind of aimed him that way.
You got to point him in the right direction.
That's right. Yeah. Well, John, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. We could certainly do a full episode with you, but I had kind of planned to do this with 4 fellows, and appreciate you responding to my post. And man, we got to stay in touch. We'll maybe we can bump into each other out there again and maybe take a hunt or 2 together. I would enjoy that.
That would be great. Yes, sir.
Well, John Staib from Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Arkansas is such a great state, great people, great sportsman state. I always enjoy going out there. John, thank you for coming on, friend. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you for having me, Steve, and the same to you, sir.
All right. Yeah, well, we've had 2 guests on this episode in our White River recap, and the guy that I'm going to bring to the microphone right now has a lot of experience over there at the White River. I've been following his posts for a long time on social media, and had thought several times about giving him a call to come on and just do a podcast about his experiences, but an interesting guy from Elkton, Kentucky, Billy Carter, a.k.a. Trammell Creek. How you doing, Billy?
Doing well, Steve. Yourself?
Oh, man, I couldn't be better. Tell me where is and what's the origin of the Trammell Creek moniker that you use on Facebook?
Well, Trammell Creek comes from a little creek in Scottsville, Kentucky. I was born and raised in eastern Kentucky and came to West Kentucky in 1995 for college. Met a gentleman that lived on Trammell Creek, and I was I'm still a black and tan fancier, but had a little female that I walked Trammell Creek a million nights with while I was in college. One of those you just hated to give up on, and she finally started treeing some coons, and I just Trammell Creek over there in Allen County, Kentucky is where that came from.
Well, I got you. Well, I'm not sure of my East Kentucky geography, but my grandparents on my mother's side were from eastern Kentucky around Paintsville.
Okay, and, I was 2 hours, hour and a half southeast of there. But yeah, good people in the mountains.
Absolutely. The best. Well, the subject this week on the Gone to the Dogs podcast is a recap of the recent trips that a lot of us from around the country make to the White River National Wildlife Refuge each year. And I know that you go, and I followed some of your posts this year. In fact, I was kind of encouraged after I'd heard a bunch of bad forecasts by reading some of yours. It looked like things weren't maybe quite as gloomy as some tried to paint. But I will have to admit, for us and our group, it wasn't one of our best years. The fellowship, the food, all that was great. But the coon hunting was a little short. What was your experience, Billy?
Well, we had we were blessed and had a really good. We got down on Sunday, and we was like a bunch of youngsters couldn't wait to get there. And we had some rolled in on Saturday, but we got down there Sunday, and it was like stomping a fire out. We was in so many coons there on Monday night early. and we just had an absolute blast.
Great.
It was a good time. I think that one of the boys had a watch on. I think we treed 4 singles in 11 minutes and 37 seconds from being turned loose. Now, that was dog split, obviously.
Yeah.
And as soon as we pulled into the spot we hunted, 2 coons crossed the dirt path there in front of us. And I was like, well, and both of those coons got away. I've still yet to have a dog good enough to tree when it crosses the road in front of me.
That's tough. That's a tough order. I don't know why it is, but it is. Well, go ahead.
We had a good night there, a good night Monday night, a Tuesday night. That weather changed.
Yeah.
I like the froze when I stepped out of the truck. We treed 2 coons. We're kind of tender. We go down there for a pleasure hunt.
Yes.
And our toes started getting cold. And guess what? We went back and watched Gunsmoke on television. And, it was exactly what we done. Kind of the same thing on Wednesday night when that rain came in.
Yes,
we got wet. Part of the party stayed. They got a 4-wheeler stuck. They got in about 5 o'clock that morning. And I was like, see, fellas, that one last turn.
That's one that does it to you, isn't it? Every
time.
Yes, sir. Well, I think we had a group of 8 guys all together. And now a couple of us are getting kind of long in the tooth. My buddy Nubbin is a senior member of our group. And I believe Nubbin's 82 now, something like that. I'm crowding him pretty hard. I'm 78. And then, it kind of goes, Morris Hardy, from Mississippi, he's 80 now. So anyway, we're getting a little older, but, I'll have to admit, I get back into the camp a little earlier than I used to. But we still have a good time. But we started off, we split up, we'll kind of usually do 2 groups, maybe 3 or 4 dogs in each group. And then just, they don't ever stay together anyway. And we treat, I think it was 10 or 11 Monday night. And anyway, we treat 11 one night and 10 the other. And I don't remember which is which. But then, man, it went south quick on Wednesday night. We did not account for a single coon. We saw one coon and never could get it to look anymore and left it. But, man, Wednesday night was a tough night for us.
It was. One thing I've learned over the years of hunting down there is we'll go out, and this is just the way we hunt it. And we're really lucky. We don't get a lot of those long walks. I think the longest walk I had in there this year was the pro sport hunt there on Friday night.
Okay.
But generally pleasure hunting, we get about a 400-yard walk. We'll take a dog piece and turn them loose. And as soon as we make that tree, we simply take them right back to the side-by-side or the 4-wheeler, and we drive them up and cut them again. It seems like when you cut them dogs in that country, it's such, God made just such a beautiful flat area there with no push-ups, no briars or anything. Right. It seems like them dogs just want to hustle and hit even faster through there, and then you get them mile walks. And we just, after every tree, just come back and then just drive them up a little bit and recast them. And guys that never been down with me before, they recast a couple times. Jerry Raines and Darryl Main and them was down with us the first night hunting. They was 1.7 and 1.6 something, and dogs look good off the recast, done like they want in today's standards and flash, and they're very nice dogs. But then you take the other ones on up and you drop them out and they're calmed down just a little bit, and then you go 300 yards and you tree another coon. It's just, you hunt a different way in the White River than what you do at home.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just explaining to John Staib, who's from up in Pea Ridge, Arkansas. I ran into him in the woods. We were hunting, and the dog come by. Nubbin and I were sitting in the buggy, and Keith Durkee had gone to the dogs, and his dog treed in there, and it was one of those 800 or 900-yard walks, and we decided we'd set it out. But anyway, our nice-looking red tick dog came by the buggy there, and we had a coon laying on the box, and I think that's what kind of attracted him, But a little bit, here came these guys looking for the dogs, and we talked about that. Anyway, that led to meeting those guys for the first time, led to me calling him to see how his hunt finished out and all. But the way we used to hunt the White River, we hunted a lot up around Kansas Lake, Lower Eagles Nest, that area, the pipeline,
Yes, sir.
through there and all. And we would just basically go down. As soon as we got in the woods, we'd go maybe drive 50 yards or something and turn a dog or two off to the right, let's say. And they get struck and get treed, and they'd go to them. Well, then while they were working that tree, we'd shoot one the other side of the trail, one or two.
Absolutely.
And we did that. That's the way we hunted that for years. And once we got in there and treated a coon, we'd probably turn them loose right there again. But our dogs worked different back then, And it seemed like if we stayed in the woods and just kept flipping them, they treed several coons back then. But now, I don't know. This year was a pretty lean year on acorns. Did you find any acorns anywhere?
It was, and if I had to knock anything about the White River, and I'm definitely not one to knock it at all, but this was the first year that every night I ran into at least 8 to 12 pigs. And I mean, every night. And that ground was rooted up like you took a turning plow and an old mule through there, turning sod. And they just going through there like a vacuum cleaner is what I think it was. We had a hot, dry summer. We know that affected the acorn crops also, but the amount of hogs that we were in and the rooting and everything, I think that they're just, I think they're becoming an issue on that acorn crop.
Okay,
we know they're going to take as much mass as they can.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you to give up your honey holes and all that kind of stuff.
I don't care about in the world. Hey,
but
everybody owns
was that the South Unit primarily? Or?
Yeah, that was the South Unit. That was around Columbus Lake. That was around the power line. That was around. I don't know all the lakes over there, but we hunted everywhere. Yeah. And the only place that I didn't get into as many hogs was when you come in Smokehouse Hill and you go straight down the gravel road instead of cutting to the right. We went down there and hunted the dead end road around that back lake back there. There wasn't the hog movement in there, but now when you went to the right in the Smokehouse Hill and crossed the 1-lane bridge back in there, just the hogs were just amazing to me this year. I mean, I actually was a little bit, one boy from North Carolina started talking about how they chase him in North Carolina and stuff that was with me. And I'll be honest with you, a few times, and I'm not scared to go get a dog, but I took a little trip sitting there by myself and I'd see one. I was like, well, I can't climb one of these trees. I was like, what am I going to do if one of them gets after me? So it was one of the few times my hair was standing up a little bit when I would see them. I was like, man, that ain't normal. But anyway.
But I'm thinking back over the years, I don't believe we've run into any hogs at all on the North Unit in the places
on the North Unit. I've never ran into any, and this was my 10th year in the South. We started going in 2014, and we'd see a hog or two, but this year every night was 8 to 12.
Well, those things are getting to be an issue about everywhere, I think, and there's probably no hog hunters, and of course, in the refuge, they don't have any time to hunt them, do they? Except when they're there.
That's right. Yeah. I wish they would try to trap them or do something to get them out of there, but that is going to, that's going to affect the population. I didn't run into near the hunters this year at all.
Me either.
Friday night when we were in there hunting, there was only one hunter from the beginning of Smokehouse Hill all the way to the end besides us. Wow. And I think, I understand social media is both good and bad. And I take some bashing on the social media for promoting the White River Refuge.
I do too.
And I think that it's federal land. You made a good statement there. I'd like to introduce people to ground that they own.
Yes.
That place, to me, God made for the tree dog enthusiast. You can go to the Midwest, go around that Iowa, Missouri line. You can go southern Michigan, northern Indiana, and you can tree more coons. Yes. I mean, if you're going after just coons, that's where to go. If you like a spot where you go and your dogs have got to hunt a little bit, there's plenty enough coons to train on a pup and do stuff and tree them. Arkansas is great, but there's something about walking in to those bottoms The size of those trees, how God has planted them almost in a checkerboard where you can drive a semi truck through there in places.
I know it.
That just the ambience of that place.
Yes, I call it the cathedral.
It is the cathedral. There you go. It is the cathedral of coon hunting. I mean, it's just like going to the cathedral. But it is something that every tree dog enthusiast should go down there and look at and hunt. I mean, it is just, as you well know, an amazing 160,000 acres of beautiful land.
Yes, it certainly is. And that's the way I felt about it. And, you know, I saw a T-shirt one time, the guy said, it says, "I am a public landowner." And, you know, that's true. It does belong to all of us. And, you know, I've taken some hits about promoting it, especially from people locally and so forth. So we had this all to ourselves till you start telling people about it. But it wasn't that way. When I went the first year I went, it seemed like there were more hunters then than there are now. I mean,
exactly.
You know, and that's that. In some areas now. Last year I went to the South Unit, and we didn't get down early enough. We needed an appointment, to get a place to park. But up where we hunt, off that Brown Shanty Road and back in the areas I mentioned to you before and all, we can always get a dog loose. If you hear a dog in there treed somewhere, just turn the other way, And,
that's right. And everybody's friendly. Nobody's mad because a dog backs a dog. Everybody's there to have a good time. And what you run into is 99% of the old true pleasure hunters we grew up with, that's just there having fun. You know what I'm saying? It's just there having fun.
That's exactly why we go. Now Trey Perrin was in our party. He has been his dad the last few years, and he had good luck at the pro sport hunt that you mentioned.
Yes,
and all, but and Trey's got a nice dog, and I'm sure those other dogs that were in the final were nice dogs too. But as you age, Billy, and you'll find this out, and I know you know this, but the perspective changes. If you love a hound, you love to listen to a hound, you love to look up and see eyes, you love to see good dog work, and in the company of other people that feel the same way you do. It's definitely something that I look forward to every year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And every one of us dream of winning the big trophies and the big paychecks. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, every one of us is just an old coon hunter that enjoys those things you just said right there.
Yeah, I had a big time this year. I didn't take anything to tree coon with. I took a pup with me he's going to be 5 months old on the 18th here coming up.
Yep.
And, but he got to mouth his first coon. The first one he ever saw. And then I think by the end of the week, he'd got to participate on 5. I didn't want to overdo it with him and think that they just fall out of trees, but that rascal, Keith, found a coon setting up. And he said, "There's a coon down there in that tree, Steve." And I said, "Well, I'll just send this pup that way, see what he does." Excuse me. Anyway, he got down there around that tree and got the nosing around. I'll be darned if he didn't rear up on that tree and start barking. I said, "Well, looky here."
That's right.
So, that was worth the trip for me right there.
Yes, that makes the weeks and the week-long hunting and the drive well worth it, because that comes back to the basics of seeing your project get started right there. I mean, that's what it's all about.
It sure is.
One thing I get a lot of people call me during the year to ask me about that. And I want to say this on this podcast. People say, "Billy, water." And water can definitely be an issue down there. But I've been there for 10 years and I've had one water issue, and that was me being a dummy and getting a little upset at a dog and sending him on. But if you'll simply look at, I just want to say this, if a guy will go down there and just simply look at his Garmin, and if it shows a bunch of water right there to your right or left, just drive past it and turn loose in the air with the water.
It ain't like it's the only acre out of 160,000.
That's right. People say, well, how do you stay away from that water? Well, I just look at that garment and I don't turn loose where there's water.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And that's always, the thing. Guys said, well, the dog's got behind water. And we've had a time or two where we got a friend down there that's a commercial fisherman, John Storts, and he likes to go with us when we go. He's got a little black and tan female. She's a coon treer, and but he just don't hunt her enough. And anyway, we had to not employ him, but implore him to go get Jamie Perrin's dog. I think it was last year before. Buster had gotten over there on the White River down under a real steep bank, and you couldn't get down to him, and he wasn't about to leave. He was treed. So we got a hold of John, and John brought his boat and got him out of there. But no, we haven't had any major issues like that at all, ever.
Yeah. They shouldn't let social media scare them from a good trip.
Well, that's exactly right. And our friends from North Carolina that usually come out, Jim and Jeremy, McCullough, I'm not pronouncing. Yeah, McCullough and Don Moffitt and Bill Rankin and Evan Harrell. They usually always come out. Well, I called them on my way down. Nubbin and I were driving up on Sunday, and they had opted to go to Land Between the Lakes this year, where one of them has a cabin. And I thought, I don't think I'd trade White River Bottoms for Land Between the Lakes, but anyway.
No, I'm 45 minutes from there, and you're not going to see me in Land Between the Lakes.
Yeah, I remember that so well from the PKC days. Speaking of which, we mentioned it earlier. Right. You're from Elkton, Kentucky, and I drew out of Elkton before. Man, those great days, glory days, I call them, with Aurora in that tennis center. Do you remember those?
Oh, that was the heyday, man. The greatest days of my life was from the early 90s through when it left there. I just absolutely, there was nothing like walking into that tennis center and the atmosphere of that place. I would love to see something come back there. And I think that people, a lot of the kennel clubs, I don't know why they moved it and stuff, but if somebody would go back there, it would grow again.
Well, it certainly was. I had been with with UKC for a number of years when I came to PKC, and I hadn't paid much attention to the PKC World Hunt. I'd look at the magazine in the fall and see who won it. But man, that place just blew me away. The atmosphere, as you mentioned, and it's like it's like it was open 24/7.
It was.
We would go in there, about noon, and then get everything ready for entries and all of that, and then get out of there about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, go back and get some sleep, and wake up about 11, get some lunch, and hit it again. 10 days in a row back in the Super Stakes day.
Yes, sir. I remember going down and judging for PKC one year for all 10 days. I was young, and I said, well, boy, I'll never do this one again, because I tell you what, that would get you. But it was a world of fun. All the vehicles, the lodges full. JC and Basil sitting up there on the left as you came through. You had the scorecard in hand. JC was going to stop you and go over the scorecard right there. I mean,
exactly. He read them every one, as he say, cover to cover.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, yeah. Mike Harper over there cracking jokes on
yes,
the
sir.
joy. Oh,
yes,
yeah. Great times, great memories for sure. How did this coon hunting game start for you, Billy?
When I was... Well, it started, my father coon hunted a little bit, and he packed me, that's a pretty interesting story. He packed me through the woods when I was 2 or 3 years old, and then he kind of quit coon hunting. And I remember the first coon track, I was 5 years old, and I seen it on a sandbar in Laurel County, Kentucky, in a place called Blackwater, actually where J.R. Gray lives at, right across the road from J.R. Gray's house. And from that moment right there, I was just infatuated with coonhounds. And we lived in an old mountain farm, and I would take an old dog that I'd get at the dog crate, and I'd go up to the family cemetery. I was 6, 7 years old when I actually started hunting by myself, and I would
Oh,
go 3
man.
and 4 nights a week up on our hill, and I'd sit at the cemetery. My old dog run foxes, rabbits, everything in the world. He wouldn't tree. But I'd come home with the awful stories of how many coons I'd treed, and Dad would just smile and laugh, and I probably wouldn't be gone for 30 minutes, but
Yeah.
old Blue'd be running a gray fox. Well, it went on, and I was 12 or 13, and I got my first dog that would tree a possum. And I was so excited. You'd never seen a kid so excited. So Dad didn't hunt anymore. And so I'd walk from the top of our farms on top of the mountain at the mouth of the holler. There was a lot of coon hunters in eastern Kentucky. And I would
Oh,
walk
yeah.
down to the mouth of the holler, and they'd be guys coming by to coon hunt, go up the country, as we called it, up around Lexington to hunt. And I'd be standing on the side of the road, and people would pick me up and take me. I have rode in the dog box with the dogs to get the ride. I can't tell you how many times I've rode 2 hours up the road to go hunting in between the cab of the truck and the dog box with everything we had thrown on top of me to keep me dry or warm. Uh, but it was just something that I had to do. I mean, the calling of a hound was something that I had to do.
As some of the folks say, I feel you, brother. I
Yep.
know, because that was my upbringing too. I would jump in the back of that truck and ride 5 hours to bear camp with my dad laying in the back of a pickup truck full of straw. We did have a camper shell on it, but it was not totally closed in the back, and it was colder than a dickens.
Oh, man. Yes.
Yeah, you
Them
gotta
old
love
green
it.
gum boots, I remember those freezing my feet off. And you'd get mad. Of course, I didn't start with a carbide light by no means, but it was a handheld 6-volt light and a 2-cell battery. And if somebody used the battery for more than just shining the possum up a tree, we couldn't afford those batteries. I've siphoned gas out of my father's cultivating tractor to put in my buddy's hunting truck just so we'd have enough fuel to go 3 or 4 miles coon hunting at night.
Yeah, and that's something. I can remember my dad showing me to put flashlight batteries on the stove and heat them up, and he'd get more life out of them that way.
Yes, sir. Anything.
Yeah.
I tell you what, us old houndsmen can have some stories. Now, the greatest times of our life. I mean, it's amazing how much fun it is.
Well, let's talk about you just a little bit. Now, you're in the ag business. Now, tell me about that.
So we run a small family farm here. We've got meat goats, beef cattle, market goats, daughters full of some horses. And then I'm self-fertilized for a public job, and is what I do. And born and raised on a farm there, and just always kept it in the family. And that's what we do down here. But I'm big in the fertilizer business on corn and beans, and wheat consulting is what I do as a public job.
I got you. Well, you're like Jerry Clower.
I just like Jerry. One of these days I might be a comedian just like him. I've already thought about it.
I listened to him talking about side dressing that cotton and all this kind of stuff. I said, man, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's fun.
Yep, that's the same thing. I'll tell you one thing about my profession is I am blessed. I get a lot of guys call me and say, hey, let's go somewhere hunting. And I have the opportunity to travel the United States, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. Awesome. I've got some of the best hunting. I get to go if I got to be in Illinois for a meeting, I can take the dog. If I got to be in Iowa, I can take the dog. I mean, that's one great thing about the profession.
Well, you're a people person, Billy. You've got the personality for it, and people. I never did a whole lot of physical labor in my life, although I did work hard always as a kid. I worked in a grocery store like a slave and that sort of thing. Sir. But I, through my job working with the registries, I met so many people, and I still get invitations, come up and hunt with me, Steve. And, of course, being here in Florida where I am, it's a long ways to anywhere now. But I appreciate that, and that was a side benefit of my job that, a lot of guys don't get to enjoy. So I'm very thankful for that, too.
That's right. Well, you had probably one of the toughest jobs in the world other than being president of this great nation, you and Jerry Mall and those that come before and after you, because to try to keep coon hunters happy try to understand how the casts go when there's 3 sides of the story, their side, your side, the truth. I would hope to have the phone calls and these made up things that goes on. my wife often tells me, she says, Billy, there's more drama with you all than your grandmother's soap operas. And I'm like, you're exactly right.
Drama is the word, and some people love it. They just can't get enough of it. But the thing about it is, Billy, as you get older, your BS meter pegs out pretty quick.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I used to listen to those stories. The guys come in, and then boy, and I got cheated, and that crook, and I this and I that, and my dog didn't move, and he said it did, and and he said, well, what do you think about that, Steve? And I said, well, if everything happened just exactly like you told me, I think I agree with you. But there's another fella that was on that cast that I need to talk to and listen to what he says too.
Yes,
sir. But and it was, but what, I've said this many, many times. I was with UKC all those years, and you go to Walker Days, whatever the big hunt, and on Saturday after the Friday night hunt, you stood there till you felt like there were spikes running up through your heels on that concrete, listening to the guys tell you about how they got cheated the night before,
Mm-hmm.
When I went to PKC, and this is I think it's kudos to those guys. They walked in the clubhouse. How'd you do, Billy? I got beat.
That's right.
Okay. Go get a cup of coffee. How'd you do, Billy? I got lucky. And that was about all there was to it. Now, we did have some interesting panel discussions.
Oh, yes, sir.
I love
there should be some New York City lawyers sit down with some of those panels.
Barry Kitty would make a good one.
Yes.
Barry was great to watch on a panel.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, that was a whole different ballgame. That idea, at UKC, when the question came in, the master of hounds would listen to it and then excuse himself, maybe go back and gather his thoughts on it and give his answer. Well, I really enjoyed that panel deal where everything is right out there on the open. And I enjoyed, I didn't sit panels, but we always had a representative that watched the panel discussion to make sure that the story didn't change in case there was an appeal, and sometimes stories have a way of changing,
They do.
But that was all fun.
Somehow questions have a way of change sometimes too when you're sitting there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I thought it was kind of cool. We get them all set down and put the guy with the question on one end of the table and the judge on the other end, and let the guy with the question speak first. And then let the judge give his account of it, and then let everybody else talk, and it worked great. I hope they still do that.
Oh, they still do. They still do. Yeah, and that master hound, he's handicapped. He can't make a decision. I mean, he's handicapped in that situation. But I've always said, and I like all registries because I enjoy it.
I do too. Absolutely.
But I've always said that the reason that you get some of them wild things in UKC is UKC forces you to lie. And what does that mean by that? You got to have a coon. PKC and the other ones, there's always going to be a cast winner. And hey, let's not all, let's just be.
Okay, Billy, we had a little bit of hiccup there. Let's get right back to what you were talking about there.
Yes, sir. We just talked about, it's a good thing just to have a cast winner. I was saying I wish UKC would just go on and have a cast winner like they do at their TOC or the World Hunt.
Right.
Just everybody gets one right there. But hey, they're all fun. All are good. I mean, you hear a lot of negatives from the old men at the clubhouse. I wish they wouldn't sit there and tell the younger folks because we've got to get youth back involved in this. And it's hard to get the youth back involved when the old timers are sitting there saying, "Oh, Billy Bob got me this way or done me that way" and stuff. We've got to do something to get youth back in.
Absolutely. All the years that I worked, I tried to keep it positive as much as I could, because I believe in that. And I want to encourage, it brings up something there. We went on Friday, the last night we hunted, which would have been Saturday night, a local fellow named Matt Collins coon hunter. I don't think he competition hunts. If he does a little. He's got a son there, Maddox. I guess he named him after Maddox Bay because Mac was raised there too. But he took us up the bay on the boat, and we did tree one coon up there, and of course, but his son was. In a way, he reminded me when I was a kid because I always wanted to go. I was my dad's shadow. Everywhere he went, if it involved a dog, I was on it. I was leading dogs. I remember one time I had two drag me clear down through the woods. They'd turned a coon loose. They were stocking coons for the club. Turned the coon loose, and those dogs jumped at that thing and jerked me off my feet. And I looked like one of these westerns, when the mule team breaks away. This kid was just awesome. I mean, the kid was there with us when every step that anybody made that night, pushed the boat off, tied the boat off when we anchored up there. So just, he was a hand. And he couldn't be more than 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I thought, what a blessing.
Yes, what better place to take a youth if he's been hunting with you at the house a little bit than to take him to the White River, give him the experience of that right there to where it's just a good time. And that's what the White River's about right there.
Yeah, you summed it up for sure. It's a good time. I think if guys go out there thinking numbers, we got to catch, if we don't catch 10 coons a night, we haven't had a good time.
That's right.
That's a total. That's unfortunate. I hate to see anyone approach that in that way. Yeah. But man, you couldn't have more fun than we do with our group. Sounds like you got a good group too.
We've got a good crew. There's going to be nights, like I've told people, that if I was feeding a family, I'd starve trying to tree coons in the White River. And then there's nights that they're everywhere. But one thing about them coons too, down there, I believe, is weather changes and shifts just a little bit. They shut down. There's a time of night that they're done just like a light switch.
Yeah.
And that's when you go back to that club, back to your camp, and you reminisce, you swap your stories, you have a good time, and you don't go down there trying to kill yourself. Some of them young gung-ho, and that's fine. We were both young and gung-ho and go till daylight. But that place can be miserable if you're trying to do that. But go down there with a good time to say, hey, we're going to try to tree 20 or 30 coons this week. We're going to hunt 4 or 5 hours, and we're going to laugh, cut up, eat little Debbie cakes, and drink coffee. And that's the greatest experience one can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to sum it up, Billy. Let's talk about your situation right now. What you hunting? What you got on the end of the leash?
I always just hunt one dog, and Rod Vincent over in North Carolina and I are partners on several dogs, so it makes it a little difficult. I've been hunting a dog called Mike that he took back over that was out of that dog Bill Stokes hunted out of Mo Fish and Money, I believe was the name. And so he took him back to North Carolina, and I got a female here at the house I'm hunting now out of Kerry Harold's Swamp Nub dog, which is 7 Mile Swamp and clover bred. And I really like her. She's a spring 3-year-old. She's got holes. She just covers her holes up pretty good by having a lot of coons when she trees.
Yeah.
She probably stays on the ground more than what some people would like. She's not that ambush style dog, but I've got a pleasure hunt what I'm going to competition hunt, and I'm going to pleasure hunt way more than I competition hunt, and she suits me. And then I got a little pup out of a fall 1-year-old out of a Hardeman's Jeb and Jake Reiniger's Rose female. And she's running and treeing really well on every tree, ready to be singled out. She came in heat on me 3 days before the White River, and that was like putting a balloon and popping a balloon at the birthday party because I was really hoping to get her out there for the week. But those are the two I'm fooling with right now. And in my whole life, I wanted to try a bird dog cross. And,
all right.
But I was never going to breed a walker to a bird dog or any hound to a bird dog just because I just never did. But while I was down there, Gary Miller happened to have a bird dog walker cross pup that he gave me. And so I got that here with some. And when I picked it up, it happens to be a performance pup and a super steak pup. I was like, who in the world has got a performance and a super steak half bird dog pup in this world? But I do.
Might as well. Somebody might as well have one, right?
That's right. But so I'm gonna try that around. I've always heard them old timers talk about bird dogs and noses. So that's
for sure. And
see.
There was, you know how the coon dog groomer mill works, but over the years down through history, I've heard of a few dogs that were said to have had some bird dog in them. You know, they didn't show on their papers, but
same way. Well, you know, back in the old days when we had the dogs that hunted with us and had intelligence, I say hunt with intelligence because I think a lot of these dogs today have no intelligence. They hunt, but I ain't gonna say they got intelligence.
Right, I'm with you
because I've got as big a hunting and pretty a hunting as I can have in Western Kentucky, and I couldn't handle 4 of these dogs for 2 hours in my spots. But I can go in there with dogs with intelligence and tree several coons. But back then, who knew what they were really out of? You know what I'm saying? We went to the dog trade. We got a dog, and stuff happened. I mean, some of the greatest were guilty of it. We had good dogs.
I had an experience that I've talked about probably a few years ago in Texas when I was out there in the Air Force, and those guys would pick me up and take me coon hunting. They had a little blue Gyp there, all blue. She didn't have any tan on her. Okie was her name. And we'd go to the night hunts, you know, and I'd hunt Okie for them. And I'd play, and, you know, I'd get a placement about every time. You know, she's a good little coon treer. And I was talking to him one night after the hunt, and I said, you know, this Leroy Penny's got this Arkansas blue dog up here. And his papers and Okie's papers match up pretty good. Looked like it'd be a good dog to breed to. And they said, they started laughing at me. And I said, well, what's wrong? They said, those aren't Okie's papers. You know, we don't know what Okie's out of, but we put those papers on her so we could go to the coon hunts, you know, with her. And I said, no, man, I can't do that. You guys, I can't do that anymore. But, you know, as you said, that was not too uncommon back in the day.
It was a common practice back then.
Yeah.
It just was. I mean, it just days back. DNA changed all that. I've always said DNA ruined a lot of great breeding programs.
Probably did. Well, you mentioned Hardeman's Jeb, and I spent 7 nights in a row up in Pennsylvania hunting with Randy Smith, and he's got a Jim Dandy female out of Jeb. He calls her Little Fran, and she's a dandy, I tell you. Yep. So I hope yours turns out that way.
I hope so, too. It's the first one I've hunted out of Jeb, and I know Jeb's a nice dog, but I'm impressed with what I see right here.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, Billy, I've kept you on here probably 30 minutes or more, probably longer than I intended to, but I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the White River Refuge. You know, it's kind of become the mecca for coon hunters. If you haven't been, you should go, and when you do, be respectful. Be respectful of your other hunters, you know, try not to turn in on top of somebody else. Of course, the dogs, the way we hunt them today, they'll hardly pack anyway. But anyway, it's a great experience. And I like to hear from, you know, the first timers and the long timers like you. And anything else we need to
No,
discuss?
That was good. I appreciate you having me on. Y'all have a Merry Christmas out there in Coon Dog Podcast, and God bless everyone. Remember the reason for the season, and you have a great evening, Steve.
Billy, I can't thank you enough, my friend Billy Carter from Elton, Kentucky there, a long-time coon hunter. Look him up on social media. Goes by Trammel, Trammel Creek, and he always has something interesting to post. So follow him, and Billy will return those wishes for a great, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you, my friend.
Yes, sir. Take care, Steve.
Okay, we're going to move over to the state of South Carolina for our next guest. This gentleman's name is Caleb Griffin. This is my first opportunity to speak with Caleb, and we were just talking there for a minute before airtime that he and I have a mutual friend, Chris Rochester, up there in the area where Caleb lives. Caleb is from Westminster, up in the northwest corner of the state, not far from the Georgia line. And he goes to the White River. Is that right, Caleb?
Yes, sir. That's right.
How long have you been going out to Arkansas?
Probably, I think around 5 or 6 years. The last 2 years ago, for 2 years in a row. And the guy, I'm pretty sure you probably know, his name's Alan Bridges. He and I went out there together twice.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I feel sorry for you, brother. I'll be just as kind as I can be on this podcast.
Alan's a good one now.
If you went all the way to Arkansas with Alan Bridges, you have my utmost sympathy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Alan's a good fella. He's been on this podcast 2 or 3 times, and yeah, I've known Alan. I've gone to Alan's place and went hunting with him.
Yes, sir.
With a fellow named Jason Carey.
I know him. I know Jason as well.
Yeah, and one of my plot buddies down here, Gordy Schrader, we went up there. I think it was that Peach Classic, I think, or it might have been the zone hunt. There was a zone hunt there at Elberton, I believe, for UKC World. I think maybe that's why we were there. But, well, okay, that's cool. Very cool. How old are you, Caleb?
I am 36 years old.
Oh, man, I got you. Let's see. I got you twice plus 6.
Goodness
No,
gracious.
No, wait a minute. You're 36. That'd be 72 plus, yeah. Yeah, so I got you 2 times plus 6. So I'm older than dirt. Everybody knows that. And if I fall asleep on you, just, holler at me, okay?
Yes, sir, I will.
All right. Well, what piqued your interest in the White River? Why'd you go out there in the first place?
About probably 6 years ago, I was hunting at the CHKC World Hunt, and I drew a guy named Travis Tate and the late Michael Moody. And he and I, all 3 of us were talking on that cast. We all drew out together that night. And Travis Tate had mentioned, because he's from that area around Clarendon, and he was telling me about the area and everything. He was like, man, he's like, you've got to go. You've got to go. And, they rocked on for about a year. I was hunting Preacher, and that, started hunting him through the registered cast and some of the PKC Open events. And then a good friend of mine named Brent Lipscomb was coming out there. They generally go out there every year. And he opened up the invite for me to go out there and stay with him at Maddox Bay. And it changed my world. I've never stood in open timber in just awe. and I've seen so much beauty in a set of woods. I've tried to explain it to people all over the country. And I've told them, I was like, woods are pretty no matter where you're at. And if you're in the mountains where I'm from, if you're in the flat country, in the low country, down around the coast, I said, but nothing can beat the timber of the Mississippi Delta or the Arkansas Delta. You cannot. There's just something about the beauty of that place and that time of year that you can't beat.
Well, I have to agree with you, of course, on that, Caleb. I call it the cathedral of coon hunting. There's just a feeling, really, that it reminds you of how great the God is to have created something like that to begin with.
Absolutely.
And how smart some people, and I don't know, I go back to the history of the refuge there, I guess, and know who I did at one time. I think I did a podcast about it, who was in office at the time the refuge was established. But to get there, especially like you and me, I grew up in West Virginia in the mountains, and to go to a place like that that's tabletop flat and open woods because of the flooding and all, there's very little underbrush. We encountered more this year for some blowdowns and things like that than we normally, encounter out there. But yeah, I think most people will have that reaction when they go to that Delta country and see that magnificent timber and all. It's really quite amazing. You mentioned Maddox Bay, and we stayed in Maddox Bay this year. We had been at St. Charles for the last 4 years in a duck lodge there, but that changed hands and kind of, messed us up in that regard. But anyway, we stayed at Maddox Bay there in Lawrenceville the very first time that I went to White River. And
yes,
did you stay? You stayed in the cabins there on the left of the road, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I've stayed there. I stayed there last year and 2 or 3 years before that, and between DeWitt and Maddox Bay.
Yeah.
And now I retired out of the United States Marine Corps.
Hold the phone. Thank you for your service, man.
Oh, yeah.
Proud to talk to you. I'm not a Marine. I flew a desk for the U.S. Air Force, but yeah,
nothing wrong with that.
It's great. Congratulations. That's awesome. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, you didn't interrupt me at all. But that's what this past year it was really cool because one of my Marines is from West Helena, and
awesome.
and I hadn't seen this guy since I went on my first trip to Afghanistan. It was in 2010, and he was getting out. I had already reenlisted, and I was going to Afghanistan. And me and him, we've stayed in contact over the years, really close because he's an avid outdoorsman just like I am. And he was like, "You got to come out here." And come to find out, he's got a hunting camp in Maddox Bay. So it was like a free place to stay for me. It was awesome because I got to go hunt with one of my best friends that was a Marine. And he and I were stomping on the Mississippi River bottoms together. We treated coon right 10 yards off the bank of the Mississippi.
Yeah, how cool is that? I've hunted on the Mississippi. Well, really, one of the very first times I ever went coon hunting, first time I was only 3 years old riding mules. I wrote about it in my book with my dad and a friend of his in Tennessee. But I started school in Charleston, Missouri. My dad was working out that way, and he and his friends would go coon hunting on those big Mississippi bottoms,
right.
on the west side. Well, it'd be the same side of the river. But, and then years later, I would go up around Memphis with my friend Kenneth Raines and Mr. Fred Sanford, and we'd hunt on a hunt club there north of Memphis. It was right along the river too. So, yeah, that's an awesome experience in itself, right there, isn't it?
It was always on my bucket list to do that. I know a few years ago I made it to the finals, the UKC World Finals. It was in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and when I made it through the zones and everything, they was like, "All right, it got to be next week in Dyersburg." And I was like, "Well, it's in Tennessee. That ain't far away." That was the longest trip across Tennessee I've ever drove. But we got out there. Yeah. It was, it's all part of the Delta too. I never got to test close to it.
Yeah. I thought you were fading there on me, but I got you good, loud and clear here now. Well, that's awesome because we kind of had a similar situation there. There's a coon hunter, Matt Collins, that lives in Marianna, Arkansas, but he was raised over there on Maddox Bay. In fact, his son went hunting with us the last night we were out this year, and his name is Maddox. And
really?
It was cool, really cool young man. But he helped us out because we moved out of the lodge. We didn't have room for our entire group. We have 8 guys all together. And so he helped us and provided a bedroom with his cabin, and the guys then came over and we all ate together and hung around together. But yeah, that's just such a beautiful place out there, and I've never been there in the summertime, but I imagine there's a lot of people that are probably fishing there, and of course duck hunting is the big thing, the big draw.
Well, that's what the camaraderie of just being out there, and I like the whole town's like DeWitt, St. Charles, Crockett's Bluff, everything. It's all centered around outdoorsmen and the outdoors.
You rarely see a pickup without a trailer and a side-by-side or a four-wheeler on it, do you?
Right. Exactly. And I that's my favorite thing about it because I was like, well, we belong here. And I've told my family, and I said, if I ever leave, the mountains of South Carolina and go to another place to live, it will be in Arkansas.
Yeah. Well, I had heard all for years, what a sportsman state, a sportsman-oriented state that Arkansas was, and I really didn't think too much about it. I'd traveled there, especially my years with the registries. I'd been to Pine Bluff, I'd been to Clarksville to the Nightlight store there, and we had a PKC hunt out there in various places, But that was my first experience with the Delta was 15 years ago. This was my 15th year to go. But
really?
Yeah, really, it was great. Well, what about this year's experience as opposed to other years? Was it better, about the same, more difficult?
No, sir. No, sir. I was out there for the opener of the North Unit, and most of the time on that opening night, there's a little spot over next to Kansas Lake that I like to go to, and it's you can't
That's
take
probably
a bug
my
in there.
honey hole. You stay out of there.
Will do, sir. You can have it after this. And I remember last year, I went through there, and it's a place you can only foot walk. You can't take a side by side in there. And I was always pulling sin and get off back in there away from everything. And last year on opening night, I treated 17 by 9:30.
Oh yeah,
17 singles. This year, I knew something was wrong from the first time I cut a dog loose, because it was 0.6 before I ever drew a bark.
Yep.
And I was like, something's not right here. And I don't know. I didn't see any acorns on the ground.
Yep.
It was a lot of water, heavy flooding. I don't know. I've talked to several people. Some people say it's because of the acorns. I don't know if it's between that, the full moon that was over our heads, or so the coons may have been around pushed out and they're around the crop fields or ice fields or anything else. But I hunted the refuge a couple times over at the Brown Shanty. I hunted another little place above Crockett's Bluff, and then we ended up spending a majority of our time down on hunting the national forest down on the Mississippi River.
Oh, okay. So you kind of got out of there altogether.
Yeah, so there was a crowd. There was a slew of people, and I know it's because the water was up, and you go into the back of the Brown Shanty, you couldn't get far back there on the side by side because the water was up so high, and so it was consolidating in, and the water was encroaching in on a lot of the hunting ground where you couldn't get back in there.
Well, we didn't get back in that area this year. Normally, we get out there and hunt a few nights in the Kansas Lake area, and
right.
But this year we started our hunt on Monday night, and I believe that was the 1st of December, or maybe the 2nd, and so that area was close to us. So I didn't really get a good look at that at all. We did go down that lower Maddox Bay Road there to that new boat ramp. That's on your right as you go into Kansas Lake or Lower Eagle's Nest there. But anyway, we hunted one night, our last night with Mac Collins, and he took us on a boat, and we went up the bay and up to an area called Prior Lake, and it was kind of a nostalgia tour for Nubbin, my buddy Nubbin Moore and me, because on our first couple of years we were out there, we did quite a bit of hunting off a boat, and we hunted those areas, and also it was kind of neat to get back up that way once again. But I think in talking to the other fellows that have been on before you, and having similar experiences with the numbers of coon, I think maybe it was a combination of the drought that they had. They had a hot, dry spring and summer this year, and that probably affected that acorn crop because there weren't any acorns that I got. Yeah, and it affected, no doubt, the deer hunting as well as the coon hunting. So we knew that was facing us going out, and of course our trip. We love the coon hunting, don't get me wrong, but it's the fellowship for us. We have several fellows that are older and have been going together for several years. So, it's kind of like kind of reminds me of the guys up in the north, up in Michigan, when I lived up there, that go to deer camp every year, whether they get out and hunt for deer or not. They still go,
Absolutely.
So,
yes, sir.
So that was kind of our experience. Well,
and I'll tell you another thing I've learned out there. The White River humbled me this year. I've always took a lot of pride in having an accurate dog. I mean, I've always had, accuracy means about everything. More to me than anything.
Yes.
And I've always said, if you tree them more than two more than two hollow trees a night, you've got either a slick treeing dog or a backtracking dog, or one that's treeing squirrels. And I have never, Mr. Fielder, I have never treated so many hollow trees in my life as I have that week at the White River. It was, I felt like it was horrible.
Well,
I was like, I put my mouth here.
and so, and that's, I'd like to talk to you, or to guys like you, because you just told me earlier on last year you treated 19 singles in a very short period of time, which is phenomenal, by the way. And you're definitely packing more dog power than most of us. But anyway, I believe you for sure. But we started our week out, and I've said this in talking to the guests that have been on already here today, that, I think it was 10 one night and 11 the other, the first 2 nights that we, but that's a collective total of us guys, spreading out and hunting. We don't hunt 8 guys together. We usually spread up probably in groups of 3, usually at the most. But then Wednesday night, boom, we drew a 0, man. I mean,
we had one of those nights,
and that's
we had one of those nights, and yes, sir. And as far as numbers go, one night we treated 11 coons. That was the best night we had.
Yeah.
And we was raking and scraping with 5 and 6. The rest, and I mean, to get that, and it was. I love that place. Don't get me wrong. I love it with a passion, but it was definitely, it was the first year I'd ever been out there when the water was up, and I think the Clarendon River gauge was reading it, I think 23 feet. So it was up really high.
Yeah. I follow the gauge at St. Charles usually. And the week preceding us going out there, it was around 20. Now, I have been out there when the water's higher. Okay. And
really?
And we've hunted. And I had the first year that I was to go, it reached flood stage and they closed the refuge, and that would have been 2009. And I've seen the markers there at Maddox Bay Landing where the boat ramp was and all. There was a marker up there, and it was 20-some feet. And I think that's what they go by. I think it's somewhere around 26, 28 feet. At St. Charles, they say, they close the gates and keep everyone out of there. But we didn't experience, to qualify, we did not, the group of guys that I hunted with most was Nubbin and myself and Keith Durkee. Now, Keith's a younger man. He's about 63. He's a former Special Forces, Delta Force, all of that stuff. He had a great career. Excuse me just a minute. I think I brought some dust back with me or something. It's choking me up. I'm talking too much is the problem. But anyway, so we didn't really hit it real hard. We hunted a good bit off of Brown Shaney Road there, those various trails off there that we've hunted for years. Some of our guys went over and hunted on the north end of the South Unit, around Indian Bay and that area there.
Right.
And they tended to do a little better. But and these are guys that hunt some top-notch dogs like Randy Smith, a black and tan fancier there from Mississippi. He's always packing a good dog. Jamie and Trey Perrin from from Alabama are in camp with us, and they hunt top quality dogs. And also, I know I just took a puppy out this year, and I had a lot of fun with him, just getting him out with other dogs, and just his really first, get your feet wet kind of thing. I didn't expect anything out of him, and I got a little more than I did expect. But anyway,
that's the best type of hunting.
Yeah. It was a tough year, no doubt about it. Was there any thing particular about this year's hunt that stood out to you as a memory that you carried back to South Carolina?
Yeah, coming out here, I mean, it was kind of when we threw this trip together, it was a last minute trip, and we had our cabin, and I got invited. One of my good buddies' name is Jason Roberts. He come out there with me, and he and I both, we have a Hall of Fame, UKC Hall of Fame dogs, and we were talking, and his female had just come in heat, prior to us coming out there. So the whole time we were like, well, we're gonna make this cross. It'll be the first UKC Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame cross in history.
Wow, that's great! Congratulations!
Yep, and we got that done about 2 weeks ago. We made that cross, but it was just we were just planning out like for the next, for the future coming out there for the pups. And I was like, I've always hunted the North unit. I've never hunted the South unit, and that's what I was talking to them. As I was like, well, next year when we come out here, we might split up a few days and just come out here maybe twice, or either try to hunt the South, switch it up and do something different. Just come out here and try to hunt the South unit instead of hunting, the North unit.
Well, let me interrupt you here. My experience in the mountains, and I think you'll probably agree with this, and of course my dad was a bear hunter and for 50 years or more.
That's what I cut my teeth doing.
Yeah. And that when the mass crop or the acorns don't hit, the game moves out.
Absolutely.
It's, and that was always our experience back home. So I get all of that, but I'd never experienced it out there like we did this year. Yeah.
I haven't either. And that's like that first night when I told you it was like 0.6 something before I ever drew a bark. I was like, most of the time it's every 200 yards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I said, something's not right here. So.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's kind of refreshing this year. I mean, I'm not kidding anybody. My buddy up Nathan Eds in West Virginia says, Steve, we're standing in the checkout line. I know my years are numbered to be able to enjoy the sport and all, but, I remember so well, those early years that I went out there. And like you say, it was just rapid fire. We just eased down the trail and cut a dog to the right and maybe a young dog with it and get struck and treed, nothing flat, and somebody walked to their dog, we'd cut another one the opposite direction, and, and just kind of, it didn't have to cover a lot of ground. Well, you did. I heard back in those days a lot more dogs in the woods than I hear now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really.
Now that's one thing that I did notice this year. I've never seen so many people that were out there in the North unit. That opening few nights, I've never seen so many people.
Well, it could be because we went later. Traditionally. The first year or two, we found ourselves going. My buddies, a lot of them are black and tan guys, and they like to go to that black and tan reunion at Marianna, Arkansas, that Philip Heron puts on. Yeah, and it's over Thanksgiving weekend, and I like to be with family at Thanksgiving, and
absolutely,
yeah, and so. We started going after Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving was a little later this year, and that's why, when we got out there and started our hunt, we had already, passed the Kansas Lake boundary and our deadline, and then, we were, but we tried to stay. We figured in the last 2 weeks the crowds in South Unit would be pretty stiff. Although I talked to a hunter here earlier that said they went to the South Unit and really didn't encounter very many people at all. But
Really?
I know last year when I went right at the opener there around the 1st, there was a coon hunter behind every tree, So.
Right. I'm gonna go back out there in January with my buddy, and we're gonna hunt a bunch of deer leases and duck leases that he's got. But I don't. That's what he was telling. He was telling me, he's like, you come out here, it'd be a lot better, hunting the private land. I said, but it's still not the refuge. No, there's nothing that can compare to.
Well, that's it. And I've hunted a little private land. Let's see. We hunted one night on private land this year, and it's not. You don't get that refuge experience. Usually you're hunting around some. Kind of reminds you more of the upper Midwest, where you're hunting around fields and patches of timber and stuff.
Right.
But, yeah. Well,
that's what I asked him one time, and I'm sure you was out there before, a lot of the Garmins, and I asked him this year, I said, what did you do growing up on this refuge without a compass or a GPS?
Yeah. Well,
how did you find your way around? It's like being, where I'm from, it's like being in like a 10-mile pine thicket, and everything looks the same in all directions.
All directions. We talked about that. You walk in there 300 or 400 from your ATV. Whether back when I started hunting out there, side by side was a rare thing. Most guys had 4-wheelers, and with a crate or whatever on the back. And we would hang, and we still do this to some degree, hang either some kind of a blinking light on our buggy,
right?
Because when you get out there and you shine a tree and walk around it with your head in the air 2 or 3 times, you don't know where you are,
No, that's exactly right. I met a guy the first year I went out there, and he he lives over there. They got he and his wife have a house over on the bay, and he retired off the railroad. His name's Mr. Phil Lawson.
Okay.
And he always coon hunts black and tans, and his old dog he had road hunt in front of his buggy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me when he was growing up, him and his brothers and his father, I think you used to be able to hunt the White River off of a mule.
Yes, that's
back
true.
In the day.
Yeah.
And then they stopped it, I'm thinking, didn't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Nubbin Moore, my partner, one of his first experiences was hunting on mules out there.
That's on my bucket list. I want to do that before I die. I want to hunt off of a mule.
It's fun. I've never owned a coon hunting mule, but I've done it several times.
Right.
A lot of fun, yeah. Well, that's good. Now, you got walker dogs then, I assume, right?
I hunt a crossbreed.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
When I bear hunted, I had plot dogs. I had Hicks bred plots and Millennium bred plots. But when it comes to coon hunting, I hunt crossbreeds. I have nothing to say bad about any dog breed, but
yeah.
Sambo it was a dog. He cut his teeth around right where I'm from. My best friend was the one that owned him. His name was Wes Handy. And then I just kind of fell to hunting dogs, and then Preacher, the one I hunt, he's off Sam. So.
I got you. Well, nothing wrong with that. I've hunted with a lot of crossbreed dogs over the years. I've, my dad was a bear hunter and a breeder. We were personal breed. He just bred for himself and friends. Right. But, we just stuck with that breed for years. And I've hunted a few walkers and enjoyed them and got friends that hunt walker dogs. But I've stuck with this plot breed. I got this puppy here. It'll soon be 5 months old. I think, man, that's the last thing in the world I need is a pup. But we've got a pretty nice plot dog up there in the mountains of North Carolina that looks like he's going to produce some early starting pups anyway. So, so of all the years that you've been out there, then this one was probably the least successful, huh?
Least successful. There's not any year that I would call a bad year, but as far as the coon tree, and this was the least successful coon tree I've had.
I got you. Well, the weather's going to change every year, and We never know what the situation is going to be out there in terms of the water. The only discouraging thing that I've seen is way too many log trucks rolling out of there.
I've seen that as well this year, and
yeah.
I don't understand it.
I don't understand it at all. I know we certainly, we can print enough money to send billions overseas, and yet we're, cutting our virgin timber and our, beautiful forests like that.
And it's the same way around here.
Down the road. I don't get it at all. I know they're going to say, well, it helps, the wildlife. You're going to open up the upper overburden, and you're going to let the, I can't even think the word I want to use right now. But at any rate,
the good Lord had it all figured out with the Native Americans here, and they didn't have a problem with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And, when you stand, I see some of the pictures, and I think we mentioned this with one of the other fellows, some of those giant cypress trees down around those sloughs and so forth. And if they're hollow, you can actually get inside. You could stay out of the rain in one of those things. And it's so magnificent. It's just incredible. Well, listen, what's your biggest takeaway from, you've mentioned you love the forest out there and all. What did you bring back to South Carolina this year from out there?
Friendship. The same way as I do every year. Every year, you spend a week in a cabin with, 3 other grown men. One of them's fortunate. He's been out there with me 2 years in a row, and he and I grew up together, and we went to high school together, and then I went in the military, and he's a foreman for a welding company. But when you get to spend that much time cooking wild game, for supper every night, and just spend that much time hunting with someone, you just become better friends while you're out there. And I wouldn't take anything away from these coon dogs or these friends that I've had ever. And that's what I tell a lot of people. We were talking about dogs and price. I said, there's not a price on any dog I've ever had. And the reason for that is because money can't replace what that dog's provided for me. And it's not anything to do with material items. It's the places I've gone and the people I've met, and through the hunting world, you can't beat that. I mean,
absolutely. And if you're a hunter, it's always been, I guess, from way back in time that guys like to go camping and hunt and live in the wilderness or the woods.
Right.
Now, if you're hunting in farms in upper Midwest, you don't maybe get that. You just drive out to the woods at night and you're back home in time to watch the news. But
they don't know how fortunate they are, do they?
No. But when you're out in the big woods, and you're sitting there, and sometimes it's almost a spiritual experience for me.
That's right.
And I'll certainly echo the, our group is blessed with good cooks.
Yes.
And and we had a new fellow that joined us this year, Bobby Bly from Mississippi, and we've already told Bobby that he has to be in camp next year. He cleared the calendar, Boy, man, that guy can cook. Well, he made a roast raccoon one night.
Really?
And, of course, he had some deep-fried venison backstrap with it.
Right.
That raccoon, I've eaten coon before on several occasions, but it's never been something I really raved about. But he fixed that bad boy up right, man. He had it with carrots, all kinds of vegetables.
We tried to cook a coon this year, too.
Did you? Well, the thing is,
it did not go like this.
Well, you would have enjoyed this because he, of course, and my dad knew how. We didn't do it routinely, but I can remember when I was married, came back from the Air Force, and in West Virginia, I decided I was going to cook a coon. And my wife was we were expecting our son. And I was cooking that thing in the kitchen, and man, it didn't go well with her sickness that she was having, and she kind of ran me out of the house there with that coon. But the secret to a coon, I think, is parboiling it and skimming off the fat.
Right.
Probably 2 or 3 times, because they are a greasy animal for sure.
We did not do that. We cut the scent glands out and put it on the grill. And
yeah,
it might compare to a Goodyear tire of eating it.
Yeah. No, you got to boil that bad boy and get him tender, and it helps if you've got a young one,
Right.
But anyway, we sure had great food, and these boys from Mississippi always bring crappie and do a fish fry like you wouldn't believe. Hush puppies, fries, coleslaw. Oh man,
it's do some eating,
so good, just so good. But, well, Caleb, I have enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that we'll get to, I imagine being that close, you go to the Grand American, don't you?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, we'll be in our normal spot there. I'll be with the Full Cry Magazine gang there in the big white vendor barn there as you come in by the first entrance there. We're on the right, and I would hope that you could find time to stop by and I can shake hands with you and thank you for, as I will now, for coming on the show. I just wanted this year, because it was a little different year, I wanted to get quite a few different guys' take on exactly what kind of experience they had.
Absolutely.
Do you have any advice for anybody that would consider going to the White River? I'm sure you
only live
question.
once. They only live once, and they need to go. Just start your little savings fund up in January, and by November, go. Or December, go. You only live once.
Well, that's good.
Everybody needs to experience those bottoms. Every hunter.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. From Westminster, not the dog show in New York, but the state of South Carolina, Caleb.
Yes, sir.
Caleb Griffin. You've been a great guest, Caleb, and I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Yes, sir. And I'll see you here in a couple of weeks down in Orangeburg, and we might see each other next year at the White River and do some hunting.
Well, that'd be awesome, too, on both counts, for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, you have a great one. Merry Christmas, and it's good to talk to you.
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas to you, too.
All right. We're moving over to the state of Alabama, the town or city of Boaz, which I remember as a location for the UKC World Hunt years ago. And we're going to talk to my fly fishing buddy, Robert Cromer.
Yes, sir. That's where we should be today, is fly fishing.
Hey, I'm for it. If
I'm
you
ready.
are.
Yes, sir. Yes,
man,
sir.
Oh, man. I love that game. I tell you, I got involved with it back in North Carolina. Well, no, when I was a kid, we always fished for trout, but we were fishing to eat those native brook trout. And we used fly rods, but we would use what was commonly called garden hackle, which was a red worm. And those little brookies, boy, they would tear those things up. But our mission was to fry them at the end of the day on the tailgate, Robert,
yes,
you're a coon hunter. How old are you?
I'm 47 years old.
Well, I'm not going to say I envy you, but I've got you by about 31 years.
Yeah, sure.
But at least that maybe give you some hope that you can do this when you get to be my age.
I sure hope so, Steve. My knees are already complaining a little bit, but I hope to be able to stand there a few more years and do some more hunting. I sure have enjoyed the time I've had doing it. I can say that much.
For sure. Now, you hunt the walker dogs, right?
I do. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I see your posts from time to time, some nice looking hounds. Do you have a preference as far as bloodlines and so forth, or maybe what you're hunting now?
Oh yeah. I really like the power pack stuff. I've hunted it the last several years and been well satisfied with it. You know, like any strain of hounds, there's holes in all of them, but they suit me well, and I really enjoyed them.
Did you ever go over and hunt with Dennis and with Pack when he was living and tearing up the hunts and all that? Wasn't that Dennis Griffin?
It was, yes, sir. Dennis Griffith there in Georgia, I think around Tifton.
Yes.
He great guy, and I didn't hunt with Pack when he was older. Friend of mine and I went up, and I actually ended up in Oklahoma. It's a long story that I'll save you the spill of, but ended up at a hunt in Oklahoma, and the guy with us was actually looking at Pack to purchase him, and I guess it's when Reggie Ramsey owned him as a 1-year-old. And I did get to hunt with Pack then, and he was, you know, like his offspring. He was deep and alone, and had that coon, you know, like you want one to. And man, I remember that horn too. He had a mouth.
Yeah. Well, I've hunted quite a bit with a young man up in Virginia that bought a puppy off of Randy Smith that was out of a Power Pack and Easy male dog named Coon Valley Pack, was Sean Burden's dog up there. And I've been, very impressed with him. Tried to help Keston with that dog along as he was trying to start him on his own, without any. And that was a dog that actually made a coon dog by himself. He was never hunted with other dogs. Well, on occasion, but I mean, he just became, as you said, that deep, lonely dog and extremely accurate. I called him the coon vending machine. You just put your money in and take your candy. You flipped him in the dark, you were going to see a raccoon. Now that's a great line of dogs for sure. Yes, and they're still that way, and they're reproducing and all. So I understand why you like them.
Yes, sir.
I've hunted with a lot of them. All right. Well,
let's talk about yours. Your fever dog looks like he's gonna put something on the ground too. I know. I think the plot world should be pretty excited with what you guys are building there as well.
Well, I
just
appreciate
from the outside, looking in, looks like you guys got a good thing going there.
Well, we certainly think my friend Bill Scheniger up in Ohio, and I've told the story of this fever dog before, and I won't bore the listeners with it again, but was able to obtain a puppy out of a female that I raised down here in Florida. That litter of puppies were born in my garage here in a 55 and over community in Florida, which I doubt there's been a coonhound in here before. But the old Haas dog that I had that was that female's, or actually was the sire, I borrowed a female from Amanda Alexander in Pennsylvania. She graciously let me use that female, and we raised that litter of puppies, and I kept one named Dancer. And anyway, she found her way via Michigan up to Ohio, and Bill Scheniger bred her to his Lazarus dog and called me and said, I've got a pup here for you. So I had to face that decision. Do I want to start a pup here, which I knew the pup wouldn't get the full advantage that he would get somewhere else. And I was able, the good Lord blessed me with a great partner, Mark Miller, up in Taylorsville, North Carolina. And Mark just, he and the dog bonded early on. He liked the dog. He was a walker man too, but he always kind of wanted a plot. and it's been a good ride. He's been a fun dog to hunt, and did a lot of things at a young age. And then, if I can crow it a little bit, his puppy, I took him out to the White River this year, not expecting a thing out of him. Just wanted to get him out around some people and other dogs and the big woods, and just I took him out some in the daytime and let him roam around up and down the Maddox Bay there and all. But and he worked around on some squirrel scent in the daytime and all. Didn't tree anything, but we did get him under one, and he found that coon in that tree and did what he's supposed to do. He reared up on that thing and smelled all around and said, "Yeah, he's up there." And so that was a lot of fun. So,
it's always enjoyable to watch a pup progress, when they start coming on.
Sure is. Well, thanks for mentioning Fever. We've been mighty proud of him, and
I know you have.
And he's just been a dog that just anything we've asked him to do, he said, "Okay, I got this." If it was swimming or field trials or probably bench shows, probably not his greatest forte. He's a good-looking hound, no doubt about it. But he's not going to win Autumn Oaks on the bench. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, and for sure. Well, we're talking about the White River this year, and I've been going since 2010. It was my 15th year. How did you start going out there, and how did that whole thing start up for you?
Well, you hear about it, if you coon hunt, you're going to hear about the White River Refuge, and honestly, you, Steve, talking about it some, and I thought, we need to try to do that one year, and I think it was 2020 was our first year, if I'm remembering correctly, because this year was our fourth. So I hope I've got my dates right, but we went out, and of course, not knowing anything about it, really other than just the map you get. And of course, you had relayed some information about the licensing and getting the Dell Bumpers permit. So we acquired all that and stayed there at Maddox Bay Cabins, I think, where most folks start at. And we went out and just fell in love with it. Our first year was a little touch and go. The coon, it was cold. We saw lots of coons. We saw 20 or 30 a night sitting up, but we didn't have a hound with us that had enough nose to tree them. They just had, I don't think they were coming down. They were just setting up. There were plenty of acorns. They were just, we treed maybe a dozen coons over, 2 or 3 nights there, but just really learned the place. But the following 2 years, we had great years. We learned where the levee was and, hunted there and, actually had some spots we kind of knew by now and done really well the past couple of years. But this year was a little different story for us. I know there were some hunters had some success and we treed a few coons, but nothing, like prior years. It was just, and we didn't see them sitting up, is another thing that kind of bothered me. We didn't see, even when we couldn't tree them, we could see them. You could shine down the levee or the river and just see eyes everywhere, see them sitting up,
Right. But you didn't see that this year.
No, sir. No, right. Sure didn't. I don't know if.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't know if they weren't in the area, if they were, denned up perhaps, or, I really don't know, Steve. I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah. Well, Robert, before I went out this year, for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years now, I've been corresponding with a gentleman named Mac Collins, who lives over in Marianna, Arkansas, but he has a camp there on Maddox Bay. If you go all the way down to where we originally stayed, right on the bay there was a place called Maddox Bay Landing there, and there were some cabins and some RV hookups and so forth, and that's all been, the lady passed away, and that's all gone away now. But if you're familiar where Sweat's Camp is, What you go there past the cabins where you stayed and going into Lawrenceville, you get down there and the road turns to the right and goes up the bay. And Mac's got a house up there. But anyway, Mac told me that early on, he said, the coons aren't here, Steve. He said, there's no acorns this year. And the coons are probably going to be out on the fringe areas around the row crops and that sort of thing. And, I don't know that we found so many out there either, but we did kind of try that. We went over around, I have trouble with that, Marvel, back toward Helena.
On the eastern side there.
With a friend there and hunted on some private land one night. And we found that timber had all been, they'd built a levee in there and flooded it for ducks. So we were out there in side-by-sides, but the water was, it was borderline being too deep. So, yeah, that was a challenge for us. But I had kind of prepared myself before going out this year that it was not going to be a banner year as far as coon were concerned. But, I've seen the ups and downs over the years. I remember the camps, 15 of them now in a row for me, where, we talked about, coons are scarcer this year than they were last. But just jumping ahead here, I saw on social media just yesterday a guy named Chad Doolin. I don't know if you know Chad, but he lives out that way. I'm not sure exactly where. And he had posted a post with several coons on I don't know if it was on a trailer or what. And he said Brown Shanty was on fire last night. Well, now we hunted the Brown Shanty area or that road this year quite a bit. And it wasn't on fire when we were in there.
It may be our dog power.
It may be. Well, I hunt with some guys out there that got some really nice dogs.
Oh yeah.
And
sure.
but as I've said, and it's going to get repetitious for the listener here, that we caught 10 one night and 11 the next at the first of the week. But then it went downhill from there. We got skunked on Wednesday night. Did not catch a raccoon. Did you have any similar experiences or what?
We did. We treed 2 the first night and made a couple dens and and one legitimate slick, and which we left about 8 o'clock. There was another party in the area where we went in, and actually a large party, and it was their first year hunting the area that we generally start in. And we kind of made an agreement with them. I said, we'll go all the way to the back and we'll hunt back out, and you guys just start here at the front and hunt in. And the last tree I pulled my young dog off of, I could hear their dogs treed. So I just stopped then because he generally won't go to a dog, but I didn't,
Oh, I've
all
had
that entanglement.
all kinds of experiences with that. That hoss dog, when he was young, the plot that I had, he was a party animal, man. If nothing was going on and he could hear dogs treat 500, 600, 700 yards in there, he was going. But he learned that little button that I had in my hand could dissuade him, from doing that. But I had a little bit of trouble with him doing that the first year or two that I was out there. But, it's interesting when we talk about hunting the White River, and I'm trying, I guess, right now to not let these discussions be repetitive, but there's an experience to be had out there in hunting in the big woods. I think that's what everybody thinks about the first time they go out there, that these are indeed beautiful forests, the bottomlands.
Oh, they are. They are that.
And, but, conditions, we've discussed maybe sometimes those coon out there with little changes of the weather, it seems like it affects them more. It'll turn them on or off, And we did have some rain this year. We had some wind this year.
Oh, that wind, I guess it was Tuesday night. No, it would have been Monday night when the wind got up so bad. Which we were having a pretty good night up until the wind did come in, and it turned straight in the door of that side by side, and I actually got cold, for sure. And,
well, I find that I spend a lot more time in the side by side than I used to, and yeah, of course. Haven't been out there several times, and this is something we haven't discussed too much yet. At this time of year, if you go out there, you need to take warm clothing.
Oh, yeah,
and,
for sure.
And it's a trade-off, and I think that we as coon hunters somehow need to dig into this a little better. There's a lot of clothing now available to us that I get it. It's primarily designed for big game hunters, deer hunters, duck hunters. But there's a lot of good warm clothing that's lightweight and it breathes and it doesn't, you don't sweat in it like, it wicks away the moisture and all. And I've kind of gotten into some of that sort of thing, not all the way. But one of the best things I found was merino wool underwear. Mm-hmm. And it's lightweight, and it is all wool, but it's not hot. It's not scratchy, and it does a good job. But layers, of course, but I still wear the brown duck overalls, like Wick came out with, and later on mm-hmm. Dan's and some of those. But when you're sitting in the buggy, waiting for these younger legs to make that 800-yard walk into the tree, feels pretty good to have, a good foundation there. And
oh yeah,
and I like those little hand warmers, that you can, the little pouches, Do you ever use those?
Right. Oh yeah, the hot hands.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
They actually make one now that is rechargeable.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My wife actually got me one for Christmas a year or two ago, and I use it deer hunting, and that thing is just awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you can keep your toes warm and your hands warm, you got, But I tell you what, I rode a 4-wheel. This year I didn't take I don't have a side-by-side. The only way that I could use a side-by-side is out there. I don't have any place to ride one down here where I am.
Right.
I'm private or, they don't let us ride them on state land.
Mm-hmm.
So, I usually go and ride with someone else or take my 4-wheeler. I do have a 4-wheeler. But I didn't take it this year, but I borrowed Trey Perrin's 4-wheeler this year, one night, and we had gone over there around Marvel and all, and it was cold that night. I think we got down pretty maybe in the 20s or there close to it. And man, riding along those fields, that was just like sticking your head in a bucket of dry ice, man. I mean, it was cold.
It's probably the same night I'm thinking of, because it just came in pretty suddenly,
Yeah.
And that wind was just, you could just actually feel the temperature drop just almost immediately.
Yeah, and it kind of immediately gets you thinking about that warm fire back at the camp.
It does. It sure does, especially if you're not getting under a bunch of them, which was the case for us.
Yeah. Back on that real quick, and I'll leave it, but, what you have to be careful about is, if you do have to make those long walks in there to the dogs, it's flat, and you're not going to, most people can hunt there. Get along pretty good, even at my age, but you get too hot if you're not careful. And
yes, sir, you sure can.
And you go from one extreme to the other.
Yep, that's right. Did you guys notice uptake in the hogs? Did you?
That came up with somebody else that I spoke to here recently. We did not. Now, I didn't hear any of the guys, Randy Smith from Mississippi and Morris Hardy, and I think the parents and all, they hunted on the north end of the South Unit there a night or two, and I didn't hear them mention anything about any hogs. I did not personally see any hog sign where we were hunting, but apparently there was a lot of hogs this year.
There was, we actually encountered one pretty close, and it was actually a sow with some little ones, and the dog had kind of treed on a leaning tree out over a slough, and I walked up to get him, and my son was, a few yards behind me there, and he said, watch out. And that sow and little ones were like 10 feet from me. And
did she come after you?
She started to, and luckily he didn't shoot her, but he just, let a shot go there just to kind of get her gone.
Yeah.
And because we didn't know the regulations, honestly, but they say you can incidentally take them, if there's a problem like that. But, I honestly don't know what would be the best situation there, And,
yeah. I don't know. You don't want to get your dog started on them, that's for sure. And if you shot one, that'd probably encourage the dog. Mm-hmm. One of the fellows I was talking to, he said one of them kind of woofed at him and he looked around and he said, "Man, I can't climb these saplings here. What am I going to do?" No, I have not. And, that's the thing. I've walked over the years, all over that. Well, not all over it for sure, 160,000 acres. But I have done a good bit of walking out there, and I've never encountered anything in the woods that I recall except deer and coons. I think we did have a dog over the years, maybe one a year or something that might tree a possum. But that's about all the game, squirrels. The old hoss dog I had one night treed, and there was a squirrel's nest up there. And the late Kenneth Raines, he said, "Well, I'm going to shoot up there." That's, I said, "Well, you might be surprised." And a fox squirrel rolled out of that nest. He treed that fox squirrel. I wasn't too happy about that, but
they'll all do it. They'll all do it.
Well, I'm going to bring up something here, and we discussed it with another one of the hunters that I interviewed for this article.
Okay.
What has been your experience with the hunters that you have met, the other hunters that you've encountered in the woods? Have they been friendly? Have they been territorial? Have they been selfish? Have they been generous? What you mentioned meeting these guys that were first timers and all. What's been the general dynamic of the hunters that you've encountered out there?
Nothing but friendly. We've not had a bad meeting with anyone that I recall. We're over our 4 years of going. Most time, if somebody's already parked in a hole, they'll go on down. Especially on the levee. I know you've hunted there. There's trails, and they really eventually all kind of end up back together in there. But there's so much territory. All you do is, scoot down the road a mile and, start cutting or two. And
well, you mentioned earlier on that I may have played some part in your decision to go out there by talking about it. And, I've gotten some of them have been kind of tongue in cheek,
right. And they shouldn't. If anybody that has been out there is disagreeable to someone else coming, that is selfish, in my opinion. I go out with my son every year, and all but this year, a friend goes along as well. And there's another party that goes, Mike Hope, a friend of mine, and they have a party that go every year as well for the past 4 or 5 years. And he didn't get to go this time because he's celebrating the birth of his first
awesome.
granddaughter. So congratulations, Mike.
Absolutely, Mike. Congratulations. What greater gift could you receive at Christmas time? That's awesome.
Yeah. He missed his White River trip, but he got that in return. So I think he's still pretty blessed.
I think.
But yeah, back to that. I mean, there's enough. I think probably every coon hunter in the nation meet up out there and hunt it. At the same time, and still every one of them tree coons. There's just territory. If you've never been, you can't fathom how big it is. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how long it would take to drive from, if you drove straight through the tip of the north unit to the tip of the south unit by the roads that are accessible by vehicle, how long it would take.
Yeah, it's not a 4-lane highway.
No. It turns into some big trails in places. And
I know one of the first years that Nubbin and I were together out there. Now, he had gone many times before he invited me to go along with him. But we went all the way down to Alligator Lake, down on the very tip of the south unit down there, and that, of course, and that's the first time we hunted off the. We didn't really hunt off the levee. We drove the levee. I think it's maybe 15 miles or so down there. I think it's called Moon Lake. And Alligator Lake in that area. And there were a lot of hunters down there. We scouted it one day and then went the next night and hunted down there. And but one of my earlier guests, John, let's see, let me make sure I don't. John Staib from up in the corner of Arkansas, they encountered a situation where the battery died on their side by side. And one of the hunters, I believe John's son, was sent to try to find somebody to help them, to get that vehicle out of there. And they encountered some hunters that didn't want to help. Didn't want to unload their side-by-sides and didn't want to come back in the woods and help them, And that just really blew my mind because I have not encountered anyone since I've been there that haven't been, friendly. And
I haven't either. Yeah. Even the local people, at any restaurant you go in, which there's not that many to choose from, but in any business, there, the folks are always super friendly. I can't recall a bad experience.
Correct. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, back during COVID, we went, what is that, Brinkley?
Yeah, Brinkley's to the north.
Yeah, I think they've got a Waffle House up there. And late one night, we decided, we got done hunting. We wanted to go and get a breakfast, and went up there, and they were out of all the meat and all the cheese during COVID. I think about all you get was an egg. That's the only bad experience.
Huh? You going for the All-American, man.
Right.
No, we haven't done that. Restaurants, are in pretty short supply. We stayed in St. Charles there for the last 4 years prior to this year at the Duck Lodge there right on Route 1 and across from the campground. Some of the guys stay in that campground there at St. Charles. But we'd always drive in to DeWitt to go to the Piggly Wiggly for groceries if we needed them. And we'd always make a stop. There's a donut shop there on the left. And then we usually go in and deposit a little money at Webb's, the sporting goods store there. I'm sure you've been in there too.
Yes, sir. Sure have.
And, I've a time or two I've had to have trailer tires repaired or replaced. And there's a nice tire shop there on the opposite side of the highway there. So, but it's a different, it's remote. And trying to explain it to my wife, I said there's no hotels. There's no restaurant chains except that Sonic, I think, is there in DeWitt.
They close at dark. So
yeah, they roll up the sidewalk.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But that experience out there and just being those wide open spaces, and as you drive in to town, you have to see a field full of snow geese and speckled bellies, and I didn't. But that's one thing, I didn't hear the geese flying this year like I usually do out there. Did you?
They didn't seem as thick as they have in previous years. Now we saw several fields, snow geese and the speckled belly, and a few ducks here and there. Probably not definitely not as many, as in prior years. I think.
Well, I know, like the puddle ducks, like the mallards and stuff. I just wonder that acorn shortage. I wonder how much that affects them, because I know that they eat those things too. And yeah, if you're a sportsman, an outdoorsman, love to be in the outdoors, and then add the component of the dogs to it all, it's just a great place to be. To me, you just kind of feel like you belong there,
right? Right. It's good for a soul, especially if you're an outdoorsman. Every day we kind of do the city grind and see, get the feeling closed in, and you go out there and it does a soul good to see that there is still open places left. that big open places.
Yes, sir.
Or it does me for sure.
Yeah. Did you see much logging or timbering in the areas that you hunted?
I didn't. I did see, which I can't remember what color the markings were, but they had some trees marked, and we kind of Googled it and read up, and it said that would be a thinning project. They simulate a cut for some reason. So it stimulates, growth.
Yeah, they do that. They, I guess, to open up the canopy and the underburden or whatever or browse, for. Well, I don't know what excuse it is. I think it's dollar signs when I see those big log trucks rolling down Highway 1. We used to sit on the porch there at the Duck Lodge in St. Charles, and I'm usually the early riser in camp, and I'd get a cup of coffee and sit in a rocker on the front and kind of watch. And man, every time I'd say, I have mixed emotions, because that old boy driving that log truck, that's his living. And I understand that, and he's supporting his family. But the government of the United States does not need the money from from cutting down those magnificent trees.
They are, and I've never considered myself a tree hugger, but there's some of those cypress trees out there now. I'd probably camp out around.
I know it. It's incredible. Well, Robert, I appreciate you coming on with me. Do you ever make more than one trip a year out there? I know the license is good. We buy the year-long license because we're there usually more than 5 nights. Do you do that, or do you buy the short license?
I just buy the 5 day.
5 day,
the short term, and I've wanted to. I've wanted to go early and hunt the North Unit. When it opens, maybe, and or go a few nights early, and then kind of hit both, but. It's just never worked out, between work and.
Well, you have the Thanksgiving holiday there. That's a family time and all that. Well, one year, Nubbin and I were out at the Winter Classic in Batesville, and we drove over and hunted one night. We couldn't hunt on the refuge. It was already closed in February, but we did hunt on a duck club there. I don't remember us having a particularly good hunt. But we were along the edge of the refuge where we were hunting. So, our license was good and, left over from our December hunt. So we thought we'd run over. It was about 100 miles over there from Batesville where we hunt.
Right.
But, well, it's a great part of the world, and I have talked about it an awful lot. This year I've kind of opened up a little bit more and talked about some of the individual locations and all. I get a lot of correspondence over the year for guys that say, you know, I've never been, I'd like to go. What can you tell me? You know, and I'm always glad to try to help those people. You know, the main thing is find a good place to stay. Realize that you're going to, there are rules. They don't require you to carry that brochure anymore, but if you're going, you definitely need to read the regs to know that you can't ride your ATVs on the gravel roads. You know, you can't drive your pickup down the ATV trails. We ended rather abruptly there in our discussion with Robert Cromer about some of the rules of the White River Refuge. And we apologize to Robert. He was a great guest for us, and we'll have him back on sometime later, I'm sure. I want to thank at this time our good friends at W Hunting Supply, dusupply.com. Anything you need in the field of hunting equipment for yourself or your hounds, you can find there. Also, some great technical support for the electronic products that we depend on so much. I want to thank Buddy Woodbury and Jason Doobie for their friendship first and their support of this program. Also want to thank our friends at Alpha Dog Nutrition, our fairly new sponsor for this year, and they're doing a great job with their supplements for our hounds. Also want to thank my friend, longtime friend, Big Mark Zepp at Zepp Predator Calls. Mark has virtually anything that you need. Those great wick-type products, coats, especially jackets. Makes a great dog box. Just many different things there that you can find at markzepp.com. Okay, folks, that's going to wrap it up for our episode for this week. We want to take an opportunity, as we will again next week, to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Year's. In the meantime, I'm Steve Fielder, and I'll be gone to the dogs.